dear listeners, a quick heads up for the D's journal in this episode. It's quite a bit more intense than usual, so I've put a content warning under the timestamps. That way, if you don't want spoilers, it's far enough down that you're not going to see them. If you do want the content warnings, you can go ahead and check that out under the timestamps. And I realize this is probably a good motivator. I should do content warnings on Dee's journal just in general, because having this stuff happen to Dee, having her witness it firsthand, is very different from Tom and me kind of describing it academically, like, you know, from an outside perspective in the episode. So from here on out, there are going to be content warnings for Dee's journal under the timestamps. I'm going to put a post on our various socials on Facebook and Tumblr, and a free post for everybody on our Patreon, talking about what those content warnings will look like, what are some of the lines and fails that are pretty much always going to be there in Dee's journal, that sort of thing. I'm not going to go off on a whole tangent about that here, though. If you want to check that out, you can go over to our socials and see it. But the specific content warnings for this episode are going to be under the timestamps, and that's where they will be from here on out. Enjoy! The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 34. Titan. Based on my existing knowledge of Titan and its mad ruler, I believed it would be prudent to gather as much information as I could before entering the domain itself in order to minimize my time spent in its borders. What's more, Thanos' infamous power and ambition made me wonder whether he was one of those whom my patron described as enemies that would find no small amount of pleasure from ensuring I never have what I seek in my grasp. Out of an abundance of caution, I left my journal behind when I entered Titan, knowing that he could penetrate its illusory script as easily as Hades had. This impulse proved sound. Thanos was more dangerous than I could possibly have imagined. In retrospect, however, leaving the journal behind caused far more trouble than taking it would have. I had no way of knowing this at the time. All I knew when I finally attached myself to a trade caravan delivering weapons to its fortress was that I had not entered such an openly hostile and dangerous domain since the grid, and that I needed to keep my wits about me if I wished to come out again.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft Domains of Dread. And as soon as we started Marvel May last year, this episode became inevitable.
Along the way, we'll look at the Darklord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate this setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, Thanos Domain,
yes.
Or, as I'm going to be calling it in the write-up, the Mad Titans Domain.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm going to try to get away with in the write-up, we'll be calling him You Thanos.
Yes. As you can see from the title of the episode, this is the one we're not naming it after the movie, we're just naming it after the Darklord.
The Darklord, the character.
Thanos. This is the Thanos episode.
So, as I mentioned in our little opening joke, which I hope got a chuckle at least, that this is our second annual occurrence of Marvel May.
Yes.
A holiday we launched specifically so we could make a domain that we did last year out of WandaVision. Because,
man,
boy howdy, that is one of the most perfect Ravenloft domainable pieces of media there's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
So, Thanos is not as perfect as Wanda.
No.
No one is. But he is a really strong Darklord candidate. And we were first kind of pitching and figuring out the idea of the WandaVision domain. It was like, okay, is there enough here to not just have this be a weird one-off and like make it a recurring thing? And like Thanos was our like second contender.
Yes.
So very much one of the reasons we decided to make Marvel May a tradition, not a one-off. The main thing is there's a lot of ways that, unlike Wanda, Thanos does not fit your typical Darklord setup. Even the fact the name of this write-up is something we've not done before.
No one cares that his planet's called Titan. No one cares about Titan.
Or he has a base called Sanctuary in space with his big floaty space throne in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, with WandaVision 1, I could call the domain Westview.
Yeah.
And like the cover, we called, thanks to Rachel's brilliant idea, Wanda's Vision, so you knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But in all the text, the domain was Westview.
Yeah.
But like, I can't even do that really here.
I mean, and again, like with WandaVision, we title our episodes after the property that we're doing. So, like, you know, the Pride Lands was The Lion King. Right. Like, Elsass was Beauty and the Beast. Westview was WandaVision. This is Thanos. This
Yes.
is not Infinity War. This is not Endgame. This is Thanos.
Thanos, yeah. As I mentioned, in the write-up, I'm going to be calling him the similar to but legally distinct character Thanos, if I can get away with it. Mm-hmm. If I get a flag from DM's Guild, it will just be the Mad Titan.
Could
like
be
I
Morphos,
did with
too, or Necros,
more
or something.
Necros,
Those are
okay.
also death names, you know?
I may just have to do the Mad Titan like I did with the Goblin King. Where it's like, I'm so worried about this, I'm not even going to say any name.
Well, plus Jared and Gareth are both kind of, you know, one's the subway guy and one's from the British office.
So Thanos, the Mad Titan, Necros, does not fit, as we mentioned, as perfectly as Wanda, your classic Dark Lord specifications, but we had to make him a Dark Lord. Like, it would have been much easier to do him as a Mist Wanderer.
Yes.
To do one of our Peddler's Tale series about him. We thought of that.
We did.
We thought of a Peddler's Tale Thanos, but we were like, no, he is such a grandiose figure. He is such a, like, star that Avengers Infinity War orbits around.
He is not a Byronic garbage fire, he's a Miltonian garbage fire.
Yes. I love you.
I love you too.
He is such a grandiose and central figure that really, like, in Ravenloft, he has to be a Dark Lord.
Yes.
Someone that is
Dark
that
Powers
much.
want him so bad.
Yeah, like...
They're gonna find a way.
He's a protagonist.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the Dark Lords, is that they tend to turn into protagonists, and that is exactly what happened to Thanos in Infinity War.
Yes, Thanos will return. Yeah.
In this episode! Woo. And also, going back to a thing that we did for a character who was just a Dark Lord straight out of the tin, and we didn't need to make any changes to him. In our Hunchback episode, we opened it by alerting you to the fact that, as they say on AO3, Frollo is his own content warning. And here we are going to remind you that Thanos is his own content warning. It's Thanos, there is going to be genocide, there is going to be real messed up family dynamics. You know, some of the stuff that's kind of implicit with him taking Gamora and Nebula, where, spoilers, we're going to have him be from Dark Sun. And slavery is very baked into the setting of Dark Sun. I think that's the main reason that it hasn't gotten a 5e update yet. So there is going to be slavery. So just be aware, since we're doing a horror setting based on Thanos, we're going to be taking some of those things and amping them up a bit more. So,
you can decide for yourself if we succeeded in making him an appropriate Dark Lord in our discussion of Thanos, / Thanos,
/ the Mad
Titan. The Mad Titan. As a Dark Lord, in a section we like to call
the Lord. The Lord. The Mad Titan Thanos, a bizarre blend of wizard and warlord, hails from a distant land that I fervently hope never to visit. Wizards of Athos gain magical power by draining the life force from their surroundings through a process called defiler magic. Centuries of this exploitation have led to a barren and desolate world. Thanos' fanatical disciples claim that he once practiced a form of magic like our own. I saw no evidence of this in his domain, which makes the Pride Lands look like a verdant paradise. Whatever he may have done in the past, Thanos has fully embraced defiler magic today. Of course, as a pillar of philosophical consistency, Thanos is using defiler magic to end defiler magic and ravaging his domain to prevent others from being ravaged. Supposedly, he has discovered some ritual that allows him to rip the life force from intelligent beings and return it to the natural world, restoring some of the vital energies that his fellow defilers have drained. To this end, he sends armies through the mists to subdue villages and perform this ritual, killing half of the population in the name of restoring their life force to the land like some kind of lunatic druid. Of course, Thanos is no longer in Athos, and these measures to heal the depredations of defiler magic are unnecessary. His zealots argue that all magic will eventually go the way of Athos, pointing to Hazine as their example, and claiming that these purges help undo the damage that wizards have wrought. This also gives Thanos the excuse to ban all magic in Titan except his own, and that which he grants to the followers he calls his children. I additionally uncovered rumors that Thanos is searching for a group of potent magic items that he believes will grant him the power to perform this ritual across our entire world, killing half the population of every domain. He believes that if he channels enough life energy back into the land, the mists themselves will fade away, and our world will become the kind of fairy tale idol that some outlanders describe in their fanciful tales of home. He has already gained one of the items, a blue stone called the Eye of Odin that amplifies the powers of its wielder. Given the tales about the side effects of attuning to the eye, I have little reason to believe that Thanos' brutality will abate anytime soon.
So, if you clicked on this episode, or honestly, if you were vaguely aware of pop culture in any form in the last decade of American society, or Western society, you probably know who Thanos is.
Like, our two older kids have not watched Infinity War or Endgame yet because they were a little too young when they came out, and now they don't want to do the homework of watching all the previous movies to get there. But they know that Thanos snaps his fingers and half of the people in the universe disappear.
Yeah, they know Thanos snap. Using Thanos snap as a term, I mean, to like obliterate something.
Yeah.
Or even just, they could recognize him. And by the way, as someone who has a very distinctive memory of sitting in like my 6th grade cafeteria reading a friend's copy of the Infinity Gauntlet Saga trade paperback, the fact that I could go and pick 100 random people in a shopping mall and most of them could tell me 3 things about Thanos is boggling. That is baffling to me. But you may not know what a darklord is. Maybe you just want to hear our thoughts on Thanos, though once again I feel like there's a lot of other podcast options if you just want to hear people talk about that. This is not like Treasure Planet where you're like, oh boy, someone's talking about Treasure Planet. But just in case you don't know what a darklord is, Rachel, what is a darklord?
Well, a darklord is an evil being who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that causes the dark powers to say, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pluck that evil being up and they place them in a domain, which is a special hell tailor-made just for them. There are some great darklords. There are some not so great darklords. So we are going to get into the 4 qualities that separate the Strahd von Zaroviches from, I don't want to pick on Uruk von Karkov again. Second edition Haslick. We're going to be talking about Haslick some of this episode, so we'll go with second edition Haslick for this.
That's foreshadowing.
Yes. He was not a great darklord. Strahd was, and here's why. So the first of the 4 elements that make for a great darklord is that act of ultimate darkness. They do some specific evil thing that draws the attention of the dark powers. They don't just wander around dreaming of revenge for the fact that they got hate crimes like Haslick does. And in Strahd's case, it was because he murdered his brother because he wanted to get with his brother's fiancée. Our second element is what they call in Van Rieken's Guide to Ravenloft, the Torment, because this is a Disney podcast. We call it They Got What They Wanted, They Lost What They Had. In Strahd's case, it's congratulations, your brother is out of the way. You have eternal youth, so you're not too old for Tatiana anymore, but you're too Strahd for Tatiana, and you always will be. Our third element is an element of tragedy and relatability. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something about them that makes us wince in recognition or sympathy. And in Strahd's case, it's that unrequited love sucks. And then the fourth element is that the domain reflects the Darklord and their curse in some way. Strahd is the Darklord of spooky, gothic Transylvania vampire land. He is not the Darklord of a dead planet. And it reflects that curse of loneliness because it's full of a bunch of boring people. So just like he's lonely because he can't be with Tatiana, he's also lonely because he's surrounded by a bunch of boring peasants.
So, the trickiest thing for Thanos, the hardest one and the one that involves the most complex explanation, is that first one, that act of ultimate darkness.
Yes.
Because it's very important that is a specific act of ultimate darkness to be a good Darklord. Like, who is the Werepanther one?
Uruk von Karkov.
Golly, wow, sorry, Uruk.
Yeah, he's we're gonna pick on him, but here we...
Is he gonna be mad at me and then that's his act of ultimate darkness?
Yeah, he's gonna daydream about getting revenge on you. Yeah. Yeah, because Uruk von Karkov was like, he did a bad thing that was not his fault. And then he was a vampire and did a bunch of bad vampire stuff that we never get to hear about. And then he, walked into the mists and got a domain. And, I believe the write-up even specifically was and did some evil. Yeah, and then became a Raven. It does not hit the same way if there's not that specific origin thing. Yes. It's so important for the whole rest of the Darklord and the domain that you really need that specific one. And that was the hardest thing for Thanos, because what is that guy's
origin evil.
And, like, because we talk a lot about how with a darklord, it's not necessarily the most evil thing that they do. It's the thing that violates their own moral code that they know is wrong. And so the obvious thing there would be killing Gamora, right?
Yeah.
Because he knew that was not the right thing to do. Like, he could tell himself that his is a high and lonely destiny and he has to do this. But he knew it was wrong. But, like, Thanos was clearly already in Darklord mode before he killed Gamora, so it had to be something earlier than that.
The way Thanos is going to engage with the campaign is, we'll talk about this more later, the way he engages with the Marvel Universe, and you cannot have it be like his origin story starts an hour into Infinity War.
Yeah.
Like, it needs to be before Avengers.
Yeah.
Before the first time we see him, he is in Darklord mode.
Yes.
You could, in theory, have when he killed Gamora's village, because that's at least something specific, or her planet, I guess, because that's something specific. But it's a similar thing where, no, he's clearly in Darklord mode.
Yeah, this is not the first planet that he's done his killing half the planet thing to.
So the simplest and the clearest and the one that made the most sense would be whatever the first planet he called. The first time he did this, that works, that sets it up. But, like, what is that? That's nothing.
Yeah, so we have to come up with the story for how did that happen?
Yes.
How did he call that first one?
So, Rachel mentioned we are specifically seeing him originating before he became a Darklord and went into Ravenloft from the D&D setting Dark Sun. The planet's called Athos. I'm going to call it Dark Sun just because everyone knows it by.
Yeah.
So, I know it's not called, the planet's not called Dark Sun, okay? Don't at me.
Don't at us.
So, also, I'm going to oversimplify a lot of stuff. Don't at me.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Now you know how all the Eberron fans feel during Tom's Eberron Minute.
Yes. I don't think there's going to be a Tom's Dark Sun Minute feature, but we'll see where the future takes us. And this is like, I've got this war in my head right now. Because when we started planning Thanos, I was like, I bet this could be something with Dark Sun. And the more I researched it, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect for Dark Sun. So I want to show my work.
Right.
And I want you, dear listener, to understand how perfect this fits for Thanos. But I do not want to load you down with fantasy gibberish. This is a lot to hold in your head. So let me just...
honey. You're a teacher.
Yes.
This is going to be on the final, but the final's tomorrow. So you have to get as much of it in as possible, as simply as possible for your students to understand. Go. Okay,
so Dark Sun as a D&D setting is a kind of post-apocalyptic world. I think it's very Mad Max inspired. It's very much these, like, city-states and desert wastelands and feral tribes of cannibal halflings.
Nice.
And, that's pretty awesome. And one of the big themes, especially Dark Sun's kind of coming out in the 90s, so it's specifically an environmental collapse. And a big magic complicated reasons, there's been this complete ecological collapse of this world. And resource scarcity is also a huge theme. So thus the cannibal halflings. And so that fits Thanos so well, right? Like environmental collapse, resource scarcity, being scrabbling for survival in this blasted wasteland.
If only there were only half as many people on Athos, then I'll bet they'd be able to stretch those resources further.
Yes, indeed. And the big part of this environmental collapse comes from the fact that you have the main magic user class on this world, Dark Sun, are called defilers. And they're called that because they get their magic from draining life energy from the land. So that's sort of why, one of the reasons it's so ecologically catastrophe, because in one sense, it's a big dumb 90s Captain Planet environmentalism metaphor, right? Like, you're killing the land, you're draining its life for sort of power and prosperity, and everything's collapsed. And that is how most magic users, and you have these city-states, and the city-states are ruled by these, like, super powerful magic users called Sorcerer Kings, some of which have basically become demigods. But all of that power comes from draining life from the land. There's also our good guy magic user faction, which are much rarer, and they're called Preservers. And so they use magic, and they sometimes do take some life energy from the land, but they only take what's absolutely necessary, and a big part of their, like, slower, weaker, much less, immediately effective form of magic is the idea of you maintain the balance with...
The perfect balance?
The perfectly balanced, as all things should be. You maintain the balance of what we're taking from the land and what we're giving to the land. So the Preservers are your, like, carbon neutral, sustainable wizards. They're like, we're using magic, but we're using magic in a carbon neutral sustainability thing. And so we are imagining Thanos was a preserver. He was dedicated to trying to restore nature, to keep the ecosystem in balance, and he came to the conclusion, as Rachel mentioned, the only way to keep this in balance, the only way to restore Darksun's ecosystem, is to drain the life force from 50% of the people, the sentient creatures on Darksun, and restore that energy back into nature. And if he did that, Athos would be green again. Like, life would be restored there.
But, Tom, stealing their life energy sounds like defiler magic, and he's a preserver.
Yes, it is. So, he learned, studied, and adapted defiler magic. He eventually became a sorcerer king of his own city-state because he's like, I need to do a little bit of evil to accomplish a greater good.
Oh,
one of those
okay.
guys. Yeah.
That always ends.
That always ends super well. So that is our Act of Ultimate Darkness. Long wind-up, but here's the pitch. That's our Act of Ultimate Darkness, the first time he used defiler magic. Because as Rachel mentioned, he crossed a line. And on some level, he knew he was crossing a line that was going against everything he claimed to believe in and claimed to be fighting for. He was using the sort of tools of evil ostensibly to fight for good. And so that's our Act of Ultimate Darkness. He still calls himself a preserver. He still thinks of himself as a preserver. But he's a defiler.
Yep.
And every time he's using magic, he is draining life force from his domain, draining the life force out of the nature. But eventually, he's going to put it all back.
Yeah, because, I mean, the people who are in his domain now are his army, so, he can't drain the life force from them, because he needs them for the greater good.
So that is our origin point, and that's great for having him in Athos, which we'll have a little sidebar. So when he does this, his city-state, which we're going to call Titan, gets pulled into Ravenloft, and now he's convinced that because with Thanos, we need the cosmicness. We need the, no, this isn't about one planet. This isn't about Titan anymore. He's like, no, this is the whole universe. Like, what I have to do for the whole universe. As a Ravenloft domain lord, what I have to do for Ravenloft has to be for every domain. So he is convinced that all magic use in every domain will eventually lead to that domain becoming like Darksun.
Or indeed across the entire prime material plane, if you really want to get cosmic with him.
If you want to be a Vecna, Eve of Ruin, multiverse shaking, astral sea spelljammer shaking villain, it could be every world that has magic will eventually become Darksun. Unless I restore that balance.
And then you've got, Haslan and 5th edition Darkon over there being like, we sure will!
Yes, we will, hi! You are absolutely correct. Hashtag Thanos is right.
Yeah.
So, the great thing is we even have these canonical Ravenloft settings that, Thanos can point to and say, I told you so. So, he's like, I need to either in all of Ravenloft or even all of the cosmos and multiverse and every world of D&D, I need to do this defiler ritual of draining the life from half the population and putting it back into nature. And I'm sure you knew this was coming. He's discovered a kind of D&D Ravenlofty version of the Infinity Stones.
Can't have Thanos without Infinity Stones.
So that is his, as a Darklord, big quest, is to get hold of those so he can do this ritual, possibly involving snapping his fingers, and accomplish this goal, and then watch the sun rise on a grateful Ravenloft. Watch the very dim, mist-covered sun rise.
Maybe it won't be mist-covered anymore.
Yes, on a grateful
Maybe this is going to destroy the dark powers. We don't know.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was a very, very long walk to our first point. I promise the others are much, much shorter.
Yes.
So, Torment, or Disney, got what they wanted, lost what he had. He is destined, he believes it's his destiny, it's his fate, to execute this plan on all worlds and all domains, but he is trapped in his own world. He's trapped in Titan, and he has to use intermediaries. That's one. You're great. I have to have my worthless minions go do this. I can't do it on my own.
This is one where the being trapped in the domain itself is actually a huge part of the torment. For a lot of Darklords, that's definitely there, but it's not a huge part of their torment. But for Thanos, he can't go out and do this. He has to trust his minions to do it for him.
But the heart of the torment is that he will never get the stones. He will never accomplish his plan. He will never snap. We will never have the end of Infinity War in Ravenloft. He will never get to rest, because that's part of segging into our tragedy and relatability. I love that you have the ending.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, like, first off, I love he's so tired through the whole movie. You get, he's so weary. He's so tired.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a cackling supervillain. Mm-hmm. He's not Cobra Commander. Mm-hmm. He is just this very, very tired man. And then in the end, he has that, like, sitting on that planet and just sighing and watching the sunrise and the look of peace on his face.
Yeah.
And our Thanos will never get that.
Nope.
He will never, ever, ever even have 1 minute where he gets to just relax and rest and know that he's done and have that peace.
He probably will still have to kill Gamora at some point because the Dark Powers love that kind of thing, but it's not going to accomplish anything.
Also, that's kind of a difference from canon MCU Thanos. Something that's very similar to MCU Thanos. He will never get the gratitude he believes he deserves. Like, he has had places in the D&D multiverse, possibly Ravenloft domains, villages, cities, whatever, where he's culled the population. Mm-hmm. Like with Gamora, the whole, they were starving, the children were going to bed hungry, and now they have full bellies and blue skies and the planets of paradise, and they all hate Thanos.
Yeah. And
burn him in effigy and spit and curse his name, and he will just have that.
How dare they?
Gnawing, and he'll say he doesn't care, but he does.
He does.
You know, he said not just watch the sun rise on a balanced universe. It was watch the sun rise on a grateful universe.
Yeah.
He wants gratitude.
He does want gratitude.
All of that exhaustion, all of that burden, all of that sacrifice is for them. Why aren't they grateful?
Yes.
So we've kind of already segged into our element of tragedy and relatability. And there's a reason I think people love this character, people love this performance, people get swept up in it. You get the hashtag Thanos was right.
Like, the MCU is not known for its villains, which is one of the reasons why we will have a couple Marvel movies after this. I don't know how long its legs are going to be. But man, Thanos is one of the great ones.
He's one of the greats, yeah. He starts with a genuinely good motivation. That's part of why you get the hashtag Thanos was right.
Yes.
Is he's not trying to be Emperor of Space. He's not the Master from Doctor Who. He genuinely wants to solve a problem that is a serious problem. But he gets locked into his own head. So that people always ask, why don't you just snap the Infinity Gauntlet and double the resources?
Yeah.
Once you have the Infinity Gauntlet in your hand, there's so many other solutions that don't involve killing half the universe, killing trillions of people to fix this problem.
Or snap the Infinity Gauntlet. Now people no longer need food and water. They, use photosynthesis.
Yeah, use photosynthesis, yes. Hooray. Right, like, you've seen the memes, you've seen the YouTube videos, but that's the issue, right? Like, that's why he's tragic, is he's fixated, he's locked into this one plan.
Darklord double down.
He has a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. And there's a whole belt of other tools he has, but the one in his hand is a hammer, so darn it, that's the solution to everything. And, that's the relatability. We've all been there.
And he has publicly said the hammer is the best tool.
Yes.
So, now he's stuck with it.
We've all been there. We can all, or if not, good for you, but I bet you can imagine that. You're so, locked into this idea that you refuse to listen to any other alternative because you've so convinced yourself that this is the solution, and everybody said you were crazy, and everybody said you were wrong, and darn it, you'll show them who's wrong. And also, on a more personal level, the relationship with Gamora, the one person he really loves hates him because of what he's doing.
Yeah.
He has convinced himself that this is sort of part of his high and lonely destiny.
Yeah, this is the great sacrifice he's making for all of creation.
But it really does hurt him. Like, we were talking about, and I mentioned something about Thanos not being petty, and Rachel's like, well, he's petty with Nebula and Gamora. Like, he does get a little bit petty and personal with them, with I never taught you to lie, which is why you're so bad at it.
Or that would be a waste of parts.
I
or whatever.
wouldn't waste the parts.
Yeah.
Right, like, he's hurt.
Yeah.
He pretends he's not hurt, but he's hurt.
And I mean, that even ties into the whole he wants everyone to be grateful thing.
Yes.
Why weren't they grateful? He raised them by hand. He spared them. He made them so much more than they were.
Especially Gamora. She was his favorite.
She was his favorite.
So, right, when we get that scene in Infinity War where he kills Gamora, I think it's very clear we are supposed to see this as a great tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just like a bad guy doing bad things. This isn't Cobra Commander blowing up the moon. This is a moment of we're supposed to break our hearts.
Yeah.
Because this is the end result, and this is the core of the tragic ability. This is the end result of his tunnel vision. That's kind of the one person he loves in the universe. He will kill them for this destiny of his, for this goal. And what's more tragic and relatable than tunnel vision?
Yeah.
And then finally, we have the domain reflects the Darklord. As I mentioned, we're calling the domain Titan. We're imagining it's basically like a piece of Dark Sun in Ravenloft. So you have like a desert wasteland and like a big city-state in that desert wasteland. And so this, of course, connects to that, obviously, the idea of scarcity, environmental collapse. You know, he's living in the sort of nightmare he sees the universe inevitably heading toward. But even more than so, he's got all this power, and we'll talk more about his power later. He could help to heal Titan if he used preserver magic, if he just focused on healing and used all his power and all his resources to heal Titan. But instead, he's letting it get worse and worse and draining more and more and more of the life energy. And he's gonna, once he gets those stones, it's gonna be a beautiful verdant garden full of happy, smiling people. But to get to that happy verdant garden, he needs to drain it more and more and more and more.
Yeah,
and more.
If you are a bit more sympathetic to Thanos than we are, and you're kind of like wincing at the idea of him actively using defiler magic all the time, okay, maybe he's not doing that, but he's still not focusing any energy on fixing Titan. Again, it's all on the war machine. It's all on trying to cull other populations and find the Infinity Stones.
And it's the perfect like microcosm of Thanos, of the I'm going to do all these bad things in the name of stopping bad things from happening in the abstract future. So, I hope, with a very long sidetrack to Dark Sun, which I've done interesting, it's a good setting, I hope we have established that Thanos makes an amazing Darklord. Now let's talk more about him sort of as your player interact with him. So, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which is a Darklord, it always says, like, stats similar to A. And I picked a Storm Giant. And not the giant, right? He's not like your heroes are necessarily tiny little guys.
He is huge, though.
He is big. But, like, that level of power, that level of physical power, that level of magic power, because fighting Thanos is basically fighting a giant.
Yeah, yeah.
And a Storm Giant, they're like the top of the heap, and they have a lot of magical power. Like, they are, like, in the whole Storm King's Thunder campaign, those are like the boss fight giants at the very end. When they're supposed to party, supposed to be like level 11 are the Storm Giants. He has a huge army in Titan that serves him. We are imagining they're basically mind controlled into a hive mind, like they did with the Chitauri. And if in case you didn't know, the Chitauri in canon are a hive mind.
Ah, okay.
Because they want to make it fine the Avengers are killing them.
Yeah, that they're basically robots.
They're basically robots, yeah. They're basically the Foot Clan from Ninja Turtles. So, once again, like, if you want to have your PCs, it's totally fine to kill these people. So, yeah, they're a hive mind. So, we have his sort of hive mind soldiers and scientists and researchers and all that. And most of the population of Titan is this hive mind. He does have the children of Thanos. And this is another wonderful, like, Dark Sun overlap. Is in Dark Sun, you had Templars. And Templars were like the equivalent of clerics. In a 5e version, they'd be warlocks, because they basically were warlocks. The idea is they were kind of magically linked and subservient to one of these sorcerer kings, and they shared in their power.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for the children of Thanos.
Absolutely,
like, they're basically all warlocks of Thanos.
Yeah, like, especially Ebony Maw. Like, with like, Proxima Midnight and Gamora and Nebula, like, you could do them as straight fighter, but Ebony Maw's got to have the magic power.
Yeah. So he has these very powerful Templars who have this, like, magical connection with him that share some of his power, and those are, like, his lieutenants, and the people he most trusts, and the people that have really sort of been most raised from childhood to serve and obey and believe in him. And then also, he has numerous powerful magical items that he bought or seized or found or built or whatever in Guardians of the Galaxy, which we're going to refer to again. Surprise, it's not just Infinity War. So I think it's Ronan, the Accuser, who everyone loves and cares about, who describes...
I guess MCU, not known for its villains.
Who describes Thanos as the most powerful being in the galaxy. And the idea is like, no, he is pound for pound, punch for punch, spell for spell, character sheet for character sheet, one of the most powerful Dark Lords, if not the most powerful Dark Lord there is.
And with powerful magical items, he sees, because, this version of Thanos that we're building, he is very mistrustful of magic because it's going to ultimately become defiler magic and turn everything into Dark Sun. So he's got to get these magic items because no one can use them properly except him.
Classic. Classic Thanos. And then finally, the moment we've probably been waiting for, he has in his possession the Evocation Stone.
Yes.
So, this is our version of the Infinity Stones. We're going to call them the Eternity Stones, similar to what Legally confirmed.
Yes.
Also, I really think this is going to help with the copyright issue.
Yeah.
That we are doing it one for each school of magic. And
there aren't 6 of them. There are 8 of them.
Yeah, exactly. Totally different. In the write-up, in the DM's Guild write-up, we always do the free write-up of the domain. It'll be linked in the show notes. We have our rules for the stones. But more or less, when you get one of these stones, you attune to it as he attuned to the Evocation Stone. You get all spells of evocation are on his spell list.
Yes.
Every single evocation spell. He still has to use his own slots.
Yes.
But he knows every single evocation spell.
So if Dee were to steal this thing and attune to it, then she would only get up to 4th level because she only has up to 4th level spell slots.
But she knows every single evocation spell. She can only do the one cantrips through 4th level.
Yes. Spoilers, that's not going to happen.
Also, if you attune to the Eternity Stone, you get all of the benefits for the wizard subclass of that school of magic, of that type of magic. So he has all of the benefits, the level 1 through 20 benefits of the Evoker subclass. And that's in both, the Evoker is in both the 2014 PHB and the 2024 PHB. They don't have all the subclasses in the 2024 PHB. I assume we'll be getting them eventually.
Yeah. And we picked Evocation because, number 1, he starts off Infinity War with the Force Stone. And Evocation is the closest thing to the Force Stone, obviously. And just, it fits his style. Thanos isn't going to have the Illusion Stone.
Yeah.
He's not Loki. He's not going to have the Illusion Stone or the Enchantment Stone.
Yeah, the Enchantment Stone.
He is just going to be an absolute bruiser nightmare to fight. There are many things you could say about Thanos. Subtle is not one of them. And Evocation fits that perfectly.
And, in Infinity War, he basically casts Meteor Storm.
He does.
He throws a moon at them.
Yes.
And this is the thing. This is if your eyes are getting wide thinking about a storm giant with every evocation spell and all of the benefits of the Evoker Wizard subclass. That's how it's supposed to be. Good. Thanos is a monster. In Infinity War, he kicks the Avengers' butts.
Yes.
And by that point, they are a tier 4 party of PCs.
Yes.
Maybe just 17th level, but the point is, you have got 5 to 10 17th level PCs, and he mops the floor with them.
Yes. Doctor Strange is one of the most powerful wizards on Earth.
Yeah,
Tony Stark is the most powerful artificer on Earth.
Yes, and even something like Captain America or Black Panther. These are 17th, 18th, 20th level fighters or paladins. And he mops the floor with them. And so we designed this to be, he is going to be a god of combat.
Yes, you do not want to go head-to-head in combat with Thanos. That is not how you beat Thanos. You will lose.
So, for reasons we'll get into, one difference with the stones is this idea you can only attune to one at a time.
That kind of is what they did in the movie, too, though,
Yeah.
because for reasons we get into, that the gauntlet is what lets you attune to more than one. And that was why he had Peter Dinklage build the gauntlet in the first place, so that he could wield more than one Infinity Stone. And so we're just kind of having it be that he's at pre-gauntlet stages. That you can only attune to one at a time. He's researching the gauntlet. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. In your campaign, you can decide. If you want to start your campaign with he's figured out how to make the gauntlet, go nuts. But in our canon, he's attuned to the Evocation Stone, and he's trying to figure out how to build the gauntlet.
And as we said, we'll get into why that is, why we made the decision a little later on. So finally, the very anticlimactic after all that. After God Emperor of Combat Thanos, Meteor Storm, Thanos, closing the borders. And there isn't an obvious thing here, so the closest we could come up with, and this kind of fit Thanos, is the kind of, you go into the mist and there's basically an infinite army of Chitauri fighting you.
Yeah.
Because this is it's not close. It's kind of the opposite of closing the borders. but we have those images of the swarm at the force field at Wakanda.
Yeah, or like surrounding Earth in Avengers.
Yeah, just this flood, like that image of there is the force field, and they are just swarming and like stacking up against the force field.
And there's precedent for this. I don't remember if it's how Darkon's borders get closed in 5e or not, but in earlier editions, Darkon's borders was closed by infinite zombies. So.
Yeah, so infinite Chitauri.
Infinite
minions. So, the final part of this Darklord write-up is going to be the role-playing trait Ideal, Bond, and Flaw. In Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, they give these for the Darklords, and they give them as quotes, and we always like to give them as quotes, and fortunately, as going to come up again later, Thanos likes to talk.
Thanos does like to talk.
So we have a good number of quotes to present. So what we did, because once again, there's at least 2 and a little bit of like change from other movies worth of dialogue. This is not a Callahan type situation. So we did the same thing with Labyrinth, where we each picked our choice for role-playing trait, Ideal, Bond, and Flaw. And I imagine a couple of quotes are going to repeat. And I imagine there might be some we have in common.
Let's save trait for last, because I feel like that's where we're going to have the most difference. I know we normally start with trait, but I feel like our Ideal, Bond, and Flaw might be very similar.
Okay, there's one quote I know for a fact we're going to both have, because we talked about it as a perfect, like, oh god, Callahan, look at Thanos. He's gallant, you're Goofus. So Ideal, why don't you go first? What do you have for Ideal?
The hardest choices require the strongest will.
That is my Bond. Because I think that is the kind of sense of this mission, of this purpose, of this higher calling. But it could also be his fault. Yeah, the hardest choice require the strongest wills. That is his Ideal. That is his Bond. That is his Flaw.
That's all of them. Yeah.
That is all of them. That is Thanos. Like, that quote is Thanos. The hardest choices require the strongest wills. My Ideal was, little one, it's a simple calculus. This universe is finite. Its resources finite.
Ooh.
If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. It needs correction.
That's really good. That's really...
Right.
Yeah,
like that
yes.
Yeah,
that's... Yep. You told me.
So I am open to the hardest choice require the strongest wills as either Bond or Flaw. Like, it's all of them, because he's a well-done character.
He is a well-done character.
He's a good villain. So what is your Bond?
My Bond was, and then I finally rest and watch the sunrise on a Grateful Universe.
That is really
his
good.
His Bond is to the Grateful Universe.
That is really freaking good, yeah. Okay. My Flaw was, I ignored my destiny once. I cannot do that again, but I'm not in love with it.
My Flaw was, I am inevitable.
I am inevitable. God, that's really good. We have to have I am inevitable.
It's the ultimate, like, we couldn't ask for a better quote for Pride.
Right, yeah.
For just his hubris.
What about hardest choice to require the strongest wills is the Bond? The Grateful Universe, that's...
What about Grateful Universe for Bond? And hardest choices require the strongest wills for Flaw?
Okay, cool.
Because he's like, okay, I'm sorry, listeners, I'm gonna rant for a minute. But it's a thing that drives me banana boats with the whole making the hard choices thing, is that people always tend to think that making the hard choices means doing the immoral thing and the bad thing, and sometimes making the hard choices means making the morally correct choice that happens to not benefit you and makes you eat crow and humble pie, like saying that you're not going to kill half the universe. Yeah, or that's a hard choice.
Saying, like, you know what? When my only tool was an army of robots, my only way to bring balance would be to kill half the universe. When I have the Infinity Gauntlet, I could double the resources.
Yeah.
Or I could make everyone use photosynthesis. I could make everybody bushroot from Darkwing Duck. So...
I love you
Wait
so
for it,
much.
yes. So, for Bond, we're looking Sunrise on the Grateful Universe, and then Flaw, hardest choice require the strongest wills.
Yes.
So, okay, cool. Wow, that was easy.
Yeah, okay.
Man, that was easy.
All right, so what did you have for trait?
Trait. Titan was just like most planets. Too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution. Dispassionate, fair to rich and poor alike. They called me a madman, and what I predicted came to pass.
That's really good. Mine was, because I was thinking about how he's going to be interacting with the PCs. And this is, he's talking to Tony, who is, very much PC.
Very much PC, big PC energy.
You have my respect. When I'm done, half of humanity will still be alive. I hope they remember you.
That's really good. I picked this because he's talking to Doctor Strange, who also has big PC energy.
Yes.
She's Tony Stark with a wizard necklace.
Yes, Tony Stark with a wizard necklace.
Like, we mentioned this before, like, he's a talker.
Yes.
And I feel like whatever happens, he is going to try to argue. He is going to try to justify himself. Right? No matter what your PCs are doing or saying, Thanos will try to justify himself. And this is that scene with Doctor Strange. It isn't just like, roll initiative, let's fight. He's like, I want to show this random wizard why I'm right.
Okay, I like that, but my one problem with it is that it overlaps with the ideal a lot. They're both,
yes.
So...
It does, yeah.
We might need to cut out the recording and come back after we've shuffled things properly, but with that, we might need to shuffle things to make the ideal something. I love that for the ideal, but they're both about finite resources. I think we would either need to switch out the trait or the ideal.
I think we'll do your trait.
Okay.
We'll do the I hope humanity remembers you.
Yeah. When I'm done, half of humanity will still be alive. I hope they remember you.
And because this thing with Thanos, like, it's going to be such a fun interaction because he's not Skeletor or Cobra Commander. Because he's going to be like, I respect the strength I see in you.
Yes.
And that's going to really throw your PCs for a loop. Of the, like, horrible villains destroy everything, but, like, I respect the strength I see in you.
Yeah.
But is also, I'm going to destroy half humanity.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that was quick.
That was quicker than I thought it would be, yeah.
Once again, he's a good character. He's a well-depicted character, so we have these very clear lines of characterization. So that always makes that easier for us, especially if they're a well-done character.
Yes.
And they like to talk.
Which Thanos does, and Callahan doesn't.
So... we will now talk a bit about the sort of Ravenloft context that your PCs...
This was the hard part.
This was the hard part. We'll encounter this well-developed character who likes to talk in a section we like to call...
The Land. The Land. Titan is an arid wasteland of dunes and salt flats, rendered almost completely uninhabitable by Defiler magic. The desert beyond Sanctuary, Thanos' unsubtly and inaccurately named city-state, is a punishing expanse of furnace-like heat and little water, home to massive carnivorous insects and venomous reptiles. Sanctuary's climate is just as oppressive, but its inhabitants are less endearing. The majority of Sanctuary's residents are a hive mind of insectoid creatures called the Chitauri, who perform the menial tasks that keep Sanctuary functioning and serve as shock troops in Thanos' genocidal assaults. The others, and the reason I was so wary of entering Titan without a caravan as my escort and alibi, are the individuals that Thanos euphemistically calls his children. During these attacks on other domains, the children of Thanos watch for any young people who have potential as warriors or warlocks. Rather than culling them along with half the village, or leaving them alive and bereaved with the other half, they take these youths back to Titan, where Thanos raises them as his own, with all the fatherly affection of an animal that eats its young. Only the strongest, most ruthless, and most zealous of these individuals can become true children of Thanos, with others joining the Chitauri in more commonplace tasks, if they survive. Thanos regularly pits potential children against one another in gladiatorial combat, and the consequences for the loser are severe, as they are taken to his magical laboratories for augmentation to ensure that they perform better in the next match. Adventurers, and presumably itinerant scholars, are irresistible fodder for Thanos' armies. Those who cannot be persuaded to join his cause can train his children by facing them in the fighting pits, or can provide an expendable test subject for a magical procedure too experimental to risk on one of his chosen few. The lucky ones are roped into making a bargain with Thanos to further his goals across the domains, if anyone who has a conversation with Thanos can be deemed lucky. Merchants in a trade caravan delivering weapons did not need to fear any such rough treatment, which got me into Sanctuary without incident. Unfortunately, while they negotiated with a blue-skinned woman who seemed to be half tiefling and half warforged, I decided to slip away with invisibility in the hopes of gaining more information. So much of what I had heard about Thanos was rumor and speculation, and I doubted that any of the permitted areas would reveal anything of use. I had the chance to observe one of those gladiatorial battles and its consequences firsthand, as well as overhearing revealing snippets of conversation about the search for other Infinity Stones. At some point, however, I turned to see one of Thanos' children, a tall, pallid creature without a nose, staring directly at me. He must have been using Eldritch Sight, because he could see me. Before I could react, his eyes went inky black. Sleep crashed down on me with an almost physical weight, and I knew no more.
So we have mentioned we are calling this domain, this setting, Titan.
Mm-hmm.
And we are kind of like taking, obviously, Titan where he has the battle in Infinity War, but we're also kind of mixing in some elements of some of the other sort of Thanos bases we've seen.
Yeah.
So like mostly he's in a big spaceship.
Right.
But we're just sort of combining all that together.
So like the domain is Titan overall, but like his city-state, his like Dark Sun city-state in the middle of it is Sanctuary because that was his fortress.
Right,
so.
yeah. And we are imagining it is a little piece of Dark Sun and Ravenloft. Mm-hmm. So it is the blasted, lifeless wasteland desert full of horrible bug monsters that want to eat you.
Mm-hmm. Grognards, we're going to get to Caledonian incorporating, I promise. Just hold on to your hands.
And so most of this is just like blasted desert. And then we've got like the city-state. We've got the city-state of Sanctuary. And the whole thing is kind of like the big spaceship. It's just this like giant war machine.
Yeah.
This was the hardest part.
Yes.
Because Thanos in the MCU does not really have an associated setting.
No.
And this was even kind of our biggest hesitation in doing Thanos is the darklord domain relationship is so important, and there isn't anything kind of equivalent like where Thanos has an associated place.
Yeah, like even when we cracked, because, you know, it's so much of the Thanos stuff in Infinity War and Endgame, it's him going out and doing stuff himself. And even when we kind of cracked, like, oh, okay, this is going to be like a bit earlier on when he's still sending his minions to do his work for him. He's just like locked in that mode.
This is like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Like, as I mentioned, weirdly enough, Guardians of the Galaxy is like the most useful in terms of our version of Thanos.
Mm-hmm. But like even then, Guardians of the Galaxy is just sitting on his floating throne. His domain is a floating throne. So I'm really glad, honey, that you realized that there were so many connections between Thanos and Dark Sun, because that gives us something to do with it. That
gives us something.
Yeah.
That gives us something to make this not a floating throne in space. Like that gives us something to build the physical domain around. So
yay, Titan.
Yeah, so we're all the stuff, like we don't have setting stuff for Thanos or the movies, we can fill all that in with Dark Sun. Mm-hmm. So we are imagining there is the giant city-state sanctuary, and this is the classic evil wizard king castle.
Yes!
That he's an evil wizard king, and he has a giant castle and a city around it, like an evil Agrabah, and that the wonderful thing is, we don't see many locations. Like, all we see is a throne room and, like, a couple torture rooms. Mm-hmm. But anything you could imagine there being, anything that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So in the D stuff, you're going to hear about, like, gladiatorial fighting pits. Yeah. And, like, that's kind of bringing some of that Dark Sun stuff, but also totally fits the whole evil wizard king vibe. Mm-hmm.
And even the whole, like, for training his children. And that's where Gamora and Nebula fought each other. And then Nebula always lost, and then lots of peace.
Or, like, there's vaults where he stores magic items. Or there's dungeons. Or there's armories. Or there's, like, giant, industrial factory zones where they're just making weapons and armor.
Yeah.
Just churning out weapons and armor. Like, none of that is necessarily directly in the movies, but it fits the general, this is what would be in an evil wizard king's castle.
That's big Isengard energy. Just
yeah. Big Isengard energy. What a good summary. We are imagining that he's basically controls the population, that he's completely conscripted them. He's doing your classic, Dark Sun, Sorcerer King, Evil Wizard King, that everybody's just a part of his war machine. That kind of touches, once again, Dark Sun fits so well, the sort of slavery and the gladiator thing and being a big part of the setting. It's possible we've mentioned the Chitauri, and we've mentioned the write-up of him having these hive mind armies. Mm-hmm. It's possible everyone except him and his children are hive mind. Mm-hmm. Like, if you just make things easy, like, if you want to have the friendly NPC, if you want to have the, like, person who, works on the weapons factory, who the PCs win over, who helps sneak them around, sure. Yeah. Like, it's not locked in that every single person in Sanctuary is part of this hive mind, but if you just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, if you're just like, I want to do a monster mash where my PCs kill a whole bunch of people on the way to Thanos and don't have to feel any compunctions about it, then they could be a hive mind. They're Borg. It's fine.
Yeah, this is like in the movies, where the only servants we see of Thanos, other than, like, the children of Thanos, are these just like random robot bug dudes.
Yeah.
So yeah, do whatever. Then Nebula kills one and it's fine. And another nice Dark Sun element that could fit the Chitauri very well is them being a kind of variation of the Thrykean. And then using Thrykean and using Thrykean stat blocks.
Yeah.
Because that kind of fits the idea of a hive mind. And also there is a lot in the Marvel movies, a lot of like insect swarm imagery with the Chitauri.
But I spent a lot of time on the MCU wiki when I was working on the D's Journal stuff, and like the Chitauri are apparently reptilian. They're not insectoid at all, but I sure remembered them being insects,
right, big
because
bugs,
they're so swarmy.
Mm-hmm. And once again, this is part of the MCU trying to be like, it's totally fine to kill these guys.
Yeah.
By making them like, they're like bug robots. They're like the two things it's most fine to kill. Hive-minded bug robots. So you can build that in as well, once again, if you're like, I want to have this crazy giant battle, but I don't want to, like, wrestle with the morality of killing these, like, conscripted, enslaved, etc.
Yeah.
It's like, they're high, whatever. And a part of that, like, standard wizard castle things we touched on a little bit is, of course, there'd be labs. And we're imagining, as we're going to touch on, this is before he has the gauntlet. So that's a big goal of his at this point in the setting, is to, like, pay... /persuade /abduct
/ kill all of Peter Dinklage's friends and then cut his hands off.
Your various artificers and wizards and arcanists to like research to construct this artifact that could join the Eternity Stones together.
So he can attune to more than one.
Yeah. And so that gives you a lot of plot threads, which we'll touch on in a couple of minutes. And also, potentially, if the PCs are poking around the labs, as PCs tend to do, there might be a kind of Nebula type thing where they're, like, doing augments on people. Where they're experimenting. And you could even imagine, if it's not a full-on Nebula, I could totally imagine him taking some prisoners and just, like, doing experiments to, like, perfect the augments before he uses them on his children.
Yeah.
So, lots of good stuff. Lots of good stuff. By good, I mean terrible.
And also, this is baby, but this is a rare occasion where I actually have already written the D's Journal stuff before we started recording. That usually doesn't happen.
Yeah. It's thrown me off.
But one of the things in there was the desert expanse surrounding Sanctuary. So if you wanted to have, like, on their way to Sanctuary, there's this desert, and you're like, oh yeah, I, like, found the old Dark Sun monster manual, and there are some horrible monsters
Time to break out the random encounter charts.
Then go nuts, have fun, and, like, you can really have that the PCs are kind of, like, going through the sand dunes and experiencing all of the environmental effects and everything before they get to Sanctuary. Yeah.
Good stuff, yeah. So, as we mentioned, fundamentally, there isn't a lot of specific location stuff related to Thanos. Thanos is much more about, like, a presence than a guy paired with a location or an environment. But whatever you could think of or require for your game to be Evil Wizard King, castle kind of deal, just throw it in there.
Yeah, there's one thing, once again, this is live, baby, because I realized we didn't put this on our outline, we had discussed it, but one thing that separates Thanos from some other Evil Wizard Kings, because we were discussing this, we were talking about, the tiny little bit of arable land that's still left, and they're farming it, it's probably just like, making, farming crickets and making protein slurry, and that's all they've got. Thanos is drinking the protein slurry along with everybody else.
Say what you will for Thanos. He's not having, luxurious marble baths and silk sheets in his giant bed and his, 10-course meals. He has got, like, a soldier's cot. Just, big. A really big cot.
Like, to scale.
His quarters are purely utilitarian. Like, it's work stuff. It's a bookshelf of books about, like, the Infinity Stones and magic and research and tactics and all that. And, like, a giant table with papers and maps about his conquest, and he has a cot, and he drinks protein slurry.
Yes.
Like, that he's not having feasts while the people drink protein slurry, he's drinking protein slurry made of crickets. So sometimes we have Darklord's domains, whatever, we have a great deal to say about the domain, about the physical environment. That's not the case here. But because Thanos is not so much linked to a location as a specific story,
yes,
we have a lot more to say in the section where we answer that question. Rachel, what do you do with it?
Dread possibilities. I awoke manacled in a cell before Thanos' toady, whose name turned out to be Ebony Maw, and who somehow managed an appallingly nasal voice despite his lack of a nose. When he questioned me, I provided my usual cover story. I explained that I had been hired by a wealthy and eccentric patron named Yensid, likely a historian or cartographer, to survey the domains on his behalf, using my modest magical abilities to aid in my investigation. I held to this story even as the questioning became more rigorous. Eventually, the maw did something thoroughly unpleasant that forced me to assume my form of dread. The shadowy manifestation of my patron was all he needed to see in order to drag me to Thanos' throne room with a more accurate summation of my purpose. I had seen Thanos from a distance, watching two of his prospective children throwing themselves at each other, but that hardly prepared me for his overwhelming presence. Even without the throne, he towered at least 3 feet above me. The Eye of Odin was the size of my palm. He wore it mounted on a ring. Thanos dismissed his minion, then turned to me.
You could have saved yourself a lot of pain if you told the truth right away.
I spat out a mouthful of blood. I would hate to deny myself the opportunity to experience Titan's fabled hospitality firsthand. He cocked his head.
Humor. Most people have the humor cut out of them after a session with the Maw. Strength and loyalty.
Is this how you typically operate? He tortures your prisoners, you come in with soft-spoken compliments, and you end up looking benevolent by comparison?
Believe me, I've never been concerned with how others see me.
I do believe that. I shrugged. If you're planning to ask me to divulge any of my patron's secrets, then you should prepare yourself for disappointment. He tells me nothing. He gave me an itinerary of domains to visit and instructed me to report on my findings. Nothing more specific than that. It's been quite the point of contention between us, truth be told. For all I know, the story I told your lackey is true, and he simply brought me on to improve the accuracy of his map collection. For the first time, I confessed to feeling a flush of pride in my patron. Please, Yensid, do not allow it to go to your head.
Your patron is a withered memory that doesn't have the dignity to die. While I'm away his eternity with plots and machinations. He doesn't deserve your loyalty. As for his secrets, I'm not asking.
Thanos tightened the hand that bore the Eye of Odin into a fist, and I felt an alien presence pressing against my mind. When Maleficent had pulled my patron's face from my thoughts, her touch had been as delicate as a spider's. Thanos was more akin to a battering ram. I tried to push back against him, and I felt the familiar and almost comforting sensation of my ring of protection going cold against my finger. Thanos' knuckles went white as his fist tightened further, and the Eye of Odin flared with light. My ring no longer felt cold. It was hot now, as hot as the air of Titan. My mental defenses cracked, then shattered, and he was inside my head. Everything I had ever seen or done, everything I had ever thought, was laid bare. Memories flashing before my eyes as he sifted through them, and I was helpless to do anything but watch. And it hurt. I have no idea of how long I endured his psychic vivisection before I blacked out. Eventually, my senses began to return, and the first thing I became aware of was something cold on my forehead. A damp cloth. Between the fog of recent unconsciousness and the disorientation of viewing so many of my memories as vividly as though they had been yesterday, my first thought was that I was a child again, that I had a fever, and that my mother was caring for me. But when I opened my eyes, it was not my mother bending over me. It was Thanos. With an inarticulate cry of rage, I slapped the cloth away and scrambled to a sitting position. My head swam, and I did not dare to risk standing.
There's no need for that. You're going to have a headache for a couple of hours. I can send someone with medicine if you like.
He was right about the headache. I was having trouble forming a coherent response. The one I managed was ineloquent, but colorful. He chuckled. Fondly, damn him.
You should meet my daughters. think you'd get along?
After meeting your son, I'll forgo the pleasure. I roped my wrists. At least he had undone the manacles while I was unconscious. Thanos rose, towering over me once again.
Before, I didn't know if you were a dupe or one of his ruthless, ambitious strivers. Either one could be useful to me, but you're neither. You understand what he is, even if you haven't admitted it to yourself. He really isn't worth the pain.
And I suppose you are. That's where this is headed, isn't it? To my surprise, he shook his head.
Not me. My work. My solution.
I've heard a few things about your work. Mass murder? Oh, but it's the good kind.
I call it mercy. If I get what I'm looking for, their deaths will be instant, painless. Is that really worse than being torn apart by werewolves, drained by a vampire, serving your master as a zombie or worse? If I can find what I'm looking for, all of the horrors of the mist will be gone. It'll be blue skies and full bellies. What would you sacrifice for that?
As reprehensible as Thanos may be, I will say this for him. His conviction and force of personality are unmatched. Hours later, I wondered why I had not thought to ask whether he could use the virtual omnipotence he sought to wish away those werewolves, vampires, and zombies rather than half the people they preyed upon. At the time, however, hearing him speak of his vision with such certainty, it seemed as if there were only two options. The world as it was now, and the world that he imagined. Of course I wanted the horrors of the mists to be gone. I could clearly picture my family laughing together in the sunlight, safe and happy in a world without monsters, but when I imagined it, it was my entire family, and Thanos would kill half of them and call it a kindness. I wouldn't sacrifice people. That's what you're supposedly doing this for, isn't it? The people? The same people that you're killing? Half the people you love, half the people they love, gone. Nothing is worth that.
A peaceful, safe, contented world. That's worth anything. That's worth everything.
I won't be contented in any world without my brother in it. And I won't risk his life on a roll of the dice.
A pity. If only I'd found you younger, before this world could corrupt you with sentiment. If only my forces had come for your village, I could have raised you to see things clearly, and think of the horrors I could have spared you from.
My fury nearly choked me. It took all my willpower not to release an eldritch blast into that supercilious face. I doubted his attitude of fatherly indulgence would have survived that. You saw what the hags wanted to do to me, I said when I was able to speak. I made a gesture to encompass all of Titan. It was better than this. He regarded me for a moment.
Is it better than what Aslan's going to do to you?
Opening the door to the throne room, he said,
You're free to go and tell your master. Up until now, Aslan, your scheming has been beneath my notice. See to it you keep it that way.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell.
So why did your PCs come to this place that is clearly a very bad,
It's really horrible.
very bad place?
So bad.
And I want to say, Rachel mentioned she did the D write-up early on this one. Normally it's after we record the main episode. She does the D write-up, but did it early for this one, and I read it, and I audibly cheered when I read that D traveled there in a trade caravan. Yes.
Trade caravan was on your bingo sheet. You got to check it off early this time.
So, as I've said, weirdly enough, surprising for me as it is for you, dear listener, Guardians of the Galaxy #1 is one of our, like, critical texts for constructing this domain, this Darklord, and this, like, adventure idea. Because that's the one where it's not Thanos alone as the center, the star, the whole story's orbiting. It's Thanos as part of a wider world.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to be in your campaign, probably. Thanos is like in a Ravenloft game. Yeah, there's Straub, there's Aslan, there's Thanos. He's part of this wider world. And so, yes, he does have trade caravans. He does buy weapons. He does buy supplies. He does buy crickets to turn into slurry. There maybe are just, people bringing in trade caravans loaded with grain. And he just, like, they grind it into grain slurry.
Yeah.
And everyone gets their grain slurry.
Bring in some citrus fruits so that they don't get scurvy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Grain slurry with lime topping.
My favorite.
The breakfast of champions. You also have, we mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, and this actually made us think about the first Avengers, too, which also a great example. He does make deals and do business with other forces and other factions.
Yes.
If you have somebody that's like a Loki, or much less likely a Ronan the Accuser, in your own game, in your own campaign, like Thanos could be making a deal with them. So, like, I will send my forces to help you conquer Earth, but I get this stone.
Yeah.
Or Ronan. We all remember the Ronan's motivation, Guardians of the Galaxy. I will destroy for you this planet you hate if you give me this orb that has the Power Stone in it. And so that is a fantastic way to get your PCs hooked in.
Yeah.
Is through one of those other factions he's dealing with. So I'm going to make Rachel really happy right now. So, like, if we've mentioned there is in old material, the Red Vardo traders who search for, yeah, there we go. It's the face I was looking for.
I love it when you whisper sweet nothings to me.
And they, like, find mystical artifacts. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, who would hire the Red Vardo traders?
To look for an Infinity Stone. And so that could be like you clash with them. Your PCs clash with them in like Barovia or whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And then that pulls you in.
Yay.
So there's so many ways to get the PCs in there, including one of our like favorites, one of our go-tos, second only to trade caravans, which is he has a specific MacGuffin you need in his vault. Like the PCs need the Crown of Command for whatever they're doing. They trace the lineage of the Crown of Command. Last place the Crown of Command was seen, it was a place raided by Thanos.
Yeah.
So, like, I bet he's got it. Let's go to his evil wizard castle. Let's sneak into his vaults and let's steal the Crown of Command. And then you also have, for the more direct contact, you could do it the whole, in our version, he still is sending out the culling groups. He's still, like, doing, while I'm working on the Infinity Stones.
It gets him that magical energy he wants. So, yeah.
So he is sending out them to cull. That could be a great set piece. Is this portals open and the Chitauri pour out and start trying to kill half the population?
Especially if you've got Ebony Maw there doing his creepy rituation. Like, let's have meeting.
like the opening of Infinity War, but like they can win. PCs can like push them back and fight them off. And then you could even introduce something like Ebony Maw or one of the other children to be like their boss. Like they're like children of Thanos. That's their like enemy bad guy they're going to fight.
Yeah.
And you could have a kind of Gamora type thing where the PCs come back to somewhere, it's been cold, and they're like, oh my gosh, they took our spunky psychic powered daughter. And you need to promise you'll go get her back. So they have to go rescue a Gamora type before she gets too horribly nebulous.
Yeah. And then we had mentioned this earlier, the fact that he is hiring or kidnapping, wizards and artificers to make the Infinity Gauntlet for him. And that is also a plot hook. There's a wizard or artificer and either they've been kidnapped by Thanos and they're being forced to build this gauntlet for him, a la Peter Dinklage, or maybe even they've been legitimately hired and you find out what bad news the Thanos guy who hired them is, and like, oh no.
You're like, he absolutely will kill you when you finish the gauntlet.
Yes.
Because he will pay you the money promised and then he will kill you. Because that's the great thing, like Guardians of the Galaxy, like, he's happy to pay people. Thanos is not above, like, if I can use gold to accomplish this, sure. I will use gold to accomplish this.
Yeah.
And this is the wonderful thing about Thanos, that many of our Darklords are so connected to the domain and they're so insular.
Yes.
That the plot hook is coming up with a reason for your PCs to go to them. Mm-hmm. Whereas Thanos is so active. Everything he's about is about doing stuff in other domains.
Yeah, he's coming to you.
He's coming to you. Right. You don't have to get your PCs to Thanos. Thanos will come to them. Mm-hmm. So it's just setting up exactly how you want to have that happen in a way that then will lead the PCs back to Sanctuary. Mm-hmm. So they can actually have, like, a scene with Thanos himself.
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
Which hopefully will go better for them than it did for D.
So once you find that plot hook, once you get them to follow the trail back to Sanctuary, there's an obvious story to do here that we will be talking about in a moment. Mm-hmm. But first...
Gotta catch them all.
Infinity Stones! Who's that Infinity Stone?
It's time.
So, there's not necessarily that's the wonderful thing. If we're trying to present you a Thanos that's not in full-on Infinity War mode yet, that gives you some options for smaller scale, like a one-shot in this setting. So a great potential one is the rescue of the Gamora. Mm-hmm. Like, it's simple, it gets you engaged, you get a scene where Thanos gets to talk at your PCs about how right he is about stuff.
Which is his favorite thing.
Favorite thing to do.
It's listed on his Tinder profile as one of his hobbies.
And the great thing here, like, if it's something involving the Infinity Stones, then immediately, like, the PCs are on his radar. And that immediately becomes the central story. But, like, he's not gonna break a sweat for, like, one kid.
No.
You know, like, he's not gonna call out the full forces, all Ebony Maw and all the children of Thanos, full invasion army of their home village for a kid.
Yeah.
You're gonna be sort of like, oh, well.
Yeah.
I don't want them to take the kid, but this isn't full-scale DEFCON 1.
Yeah, like, you get Gamora to defect, that's another matter entirely. But you get this random kid that he just got last week.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, that's a potential one. You could also, if you wanted to not do a big Sanctuary thing, you could take a lot from our Sean Yu episode, which not if you've listened to, and our Sean Yu Miss Wanderer, and just have this kind of persistent threat of this rampaging horde that's, like, going from village to village and culling them. Yeah. So you can take a lot from our Sean Yu story. Mm-hmm.
And that could even be a good, like, if you want Thanos to be your big bad and you don't want to build in too much with all these other people who are working for him, like, you don't want to have a situation where it's like the Red Vardo traders working for Thanos or whatever, that can be a lurking thing in the background as you keep hearing about all these villages that have been culled. And then eventually that comes into a stronger focus.
And in this case, the nice thing is you don't even need to have the Infinity Stones. Because I talk about this in the pros and cons. You don't casually introduce the Infinity Stones. But if it's no Infinity Stones, you could have a sort of Gamora little girl version of Thanos where he is just sending his forces from village to village to village.
Yeah, and he's, like, looking for powerful magical items to help him do this, but he hasn't, like, learned about the existence of Infinity Stones and started making a gauntlet and whatnot.
And then, obviously, for a really unconventional but kind of Guardians of the Galaxy adjacent thing, you could do a kind of heist story. The sort of the supreme, highest stakes possible MCU Easter egg filled heist story of getting a treasure from his fortress, from Sanctuary. So it was very, very important for us to start this section by offering you a couple of non-Infinity Stone related Thanos things, because you may say, I think Thanos is great, do a decent Josh Brolin impression, and I want to have this, but I want to just have this be like a couple of sessions. And by necessity, those plots, very deliberate on our part, don't involve the Infinity Stones. Yeah. Because if your story is about Thanos getting the Infinity Stones, congratulations, that's what your campaign is about.
Yeah.
Like, you, like, were running Curse of Strahd, never had a good time, and now I'm transitioning to some of the other Ravenloft stuff, and we're going and doing our, like, going to different domains and different darklords. No, that is about the Infinity Stones now.
That is why, dear listener, at the beginning of the episode, we said that we had it so you could only attune to one stone at a time, and that he hasn't built the Infinity Gauntlet yet, and if he does, he'll be able to attune to more than one stone. But at this point, he has the Evocation Stone, and that's the only one he's attuned to, and that's the only one he can attune to, because we didn't want it to eat our story.
Yes. We ask us how we know.
Yes.
When we say, this will eat your campaign.
Because we're like, we know what Aslan's plan is. Yeah. It's not to build the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
But if it exists, then that's going to be his plan. Aslan is going to want to snap.
And there's kind of a meta level here that's the whole point in the MCU of the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones. They are the ultimate MacGuffin.
Yes.
They are the supreme power, the supreme artifact of arcane power. Every powerful faction and NPC in Ravenloft would be after them.
Yes.
Any setting. You put the Infinity Stones, the Infinity Gauntlet in, everyone is immediately now about that. Because they are very deliberately the ultimate power.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing. If you I like this idea of the Infinity Stones because it does set up a classic kind of plot structure. You could even then not have Thanos. If you just want to introduce these as powerful magical items, you could have darklords and factions fighting over these.
Yeah, having a thing where Aslan is looking for the Infinity Stones, that sounds great. I would play the heck out of that game. It's not what we're doing, but I'd play the heck out of that game.
Yeah, even the whole, the Infinity Stones are going to eat your campaign if you introduce them. Thanos.
Yes.
Is going to eat your campaign. It's very hard to have Thanos just be this is the 3 sessions where we went and dealt with Thanos.
Yeah, but even, again, the thing that you just listened to, the scene with Thanos and D, Thanos is swaggering in all you thought Aslan was the big bad of this podcast? I'm the big bad of this podcast. And he's not. It's spoilers. Right. It's Aslan. But that's the energy that he carries.
And once again, we even had to say, okay, now that we've introduced this into our Ravenloft, how do we make this not what the story is about?
Yeah.
How do we make this not the meta plot of our podcast is about Thanos getting the Infinity Stones?
You're going to be hearing more about this in cons, believe me.
So, that Thanos is he's so powerful, he's so proactive. As we mentioned, it's very helpful that he's so active in every domain.
Yes.
He's so not insular. He's so external focused. That it's really he's designed to be the final boss of the MCU. Yes. And everything about his character, his motivation, his actions, his way of doing things, all of it screams final boss. So to introduce Thanos, you're kind of introducing him to be a final boss of your game.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's going to be a little weird. And maybe it's a fake out, a deliberate fake out of you introduce Thanos, then have him killed off by your actual final boss.
Yeah, Aslan kills him and then takes the Infinity Gauntlet.
Right. But that's going to be kind of weird. Even just introducing Thanos, your players are going to assume, okay, our campaign is about fighting Thanos. 10 years of Marvel movies.
Yeah.
We're about fighting Thanos. And that's a lot. That we have to upfront that. So, if you decide that's not a con, that's a pro. If you're you know what, I would love to introduce Thanos and have him be the big bad of my campaign and have this be a campaign about Thanos.
Of the Infinity Stones.
There's a very good reason to do that.
Yes.
Because the whole Infinity Stones story is such a good, strong, classic plot structure. And it's a plot structure that fits Dungeons & Dragons very well.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about this more in the gold material, but there have been famous and iconic D&D campaigns about this exact thing of the MacGuffin hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
Of you need to find and eat the 7 crystal babies. You need to find the 4 golden keys. You need to do this. You need to, here's these magical items. They're scattered all over. You need to go hunt them. Everyone has its own adventure. Doctor Who did it. The MCU did it. Everybody's done this. And it's a story that fits Dungeons & Dragons very well.
Yes.
Doesn't that kind of sound like an awesome...
It does.
Going around Ravenloft looking for the Infinity Stones and battling Thanos. That's a great campaign.
And even I don't remember the phase numbers, whatever phases of the MCU it is, from Iron Man to Endgame. That is a masterclass in pacing. That would be how to be pacing your campaign. That's slowly introducing these MacGuffins and then bringing in the big bad. So, there's a lot of good here. There's a lot of good here.
So, absolutely, if you're you know what, you're saying this is a bad thing, but I love this idea, you're not crazy. It's a great idea.
It is.
But it's not an idea you could dip in casually very easily. And we just want to be aware of that.
Yes.
There is one thing I want to kind of forefront with running an Avengers, MCU, Iron Man through Endgame inspired D&D campaign, which generally is a brilliant idea.
Yes.
And writes itself. And that is the issue with this. And it's the fundamental problem of taking narrative material and trying to do it in D&D in the form of like a tabletop role-playing game. And that is in the story where the villain is trying to get a bunch of magic stuff or important things to do some kind of supreme evil thing. In a Dungeons and Dragons game, success is stopping them from doing it.
Yes. So
success in a D&D campaign of the MCU would be we stop Thanos from getting all the stones. We stop the snap. Our goal is to stop the snap. So we stop the snap. And that's because we rolled well and we're smart and we're clever. And that is how it should be. Right? Like the PCs should have the power to stop the snap. However, is that going to be satisfying?
What was it? Ginny D had her when she was talking about the different player types in the DMG, and there's the planner, whoever it is, and they basically they come up with the perfect plan, and their ideal game is no encounters at all.
Yes, yes.
And it's just not having the snap happen because your PCs are so smart. On the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it would feel as anticlimactic as your awesome player succeeds at everything, and congratulations, now there's no combat.
Yeah.
He has foreseen everything that might lead to combat and stopped it, and they just blow through and steal the MacGuffin and are gone.
If the Empire builds the Death Star, in universe, your Rebel players want to stop them from building the Death Star. And that is success. That is victory. But, that kind of sucks. That's kind of disappointing if they don't blow up at least one Alderaan.
Even have an actual example of this. That, not that it didn't happen, but that, So, if you've seen Legend of Korra, in Season 3, there's this whole thing where the bad guys have this plan that they want to kidnap Korra and do something to her. And we don't find out what until the season finale, but we know it's going to be bad. And, okay, from that point on, they have to kidnap Korra.
Yeah.
And honestly, there were a couple of episodes between us finding out that they're going to kidnap Korra and do something horrible to her, and when it happens, and all of those episodes, I was like, yeah, whatever, but what happens when they kidnap Korra?
Right, yeah.
And, that's the difference, because, in a D&D game, your goal is going to be to make sure that they never kidnap Korra.
Yeah.
But as a viewer, you want them to kidnap Korra so you can find out what they're going to do to her.
And this is just sort of that push and pull of narrative of watching a movie of we don't really want the Avengers to succeed.
Yeah.
We don't really want them to stop the snap from happening. We want that to happen. All of the narrative is building toward that.
Yeah.
And if they actually stop the snap from happening, and that was it. It was one movie called Infinity War, and it had a happy ending, and they stopped the snap from happening and beat Thanos, and Thor axed him in the head. That would kind of have been a letdown. There would have been just a little itch that wasn't scratched in the back of our brain. So to present this story in a totally narratively satisfying way, the snap's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's railroading. Yeah. For you to come in and say, it does not matter what the PCs do. It does not matter what they roll. The snap is happening. That is bad DMing.
Yeah.
And this is 100%. Just fundamentally a clash between a narrative and between a tabletop role-playing game.
Yes.
However, we do have some suggestions. We're not just saying, here's a problem, good luck.
Yeah, and one of them is if the end of the Infinity War had been Thor axes Thanos, he does go for the head.
Yeah.
The end. That would have been really anticlimactic. But watching it in the theater, when Wanda killed Vision, I hadn't read the comics, I didn't know. I actually did think that was going to be the end.
Yes,
I was like, this is how it ends. This is Wanda sacrifices Vision, and the power of this amazing sacrifice is going to be the thing that stops Thanos. And it wasn't, but, that would have been narratively satisfying. So if one of your PCs makes a sacrifice like that, either, they sacrifice themselves, they sacrifice a loved one, whether they're Vision or Wanda in this scenario, that would be a narratively satisfying way to stop Thanos.
The movie could have ended there. And that would have been okay.
Yeah.
So that is an option.
Not as good, but okay. And then another thing, this I think is really going to be a key thing. In Infinity War, it's a binary success or fail.
Snap or no snap.
Snap or no snap. That's all there is. If he doesn't have all the Infinity Stones, he can't do the snap. But as a DM, you have the freedom to not have it be binary.
Yes.
It's like Thanos in the movie, he only has yes or no. As a DM, you can have yes, but, or no, but, or yes, and. So if the PCs stop him from getting one or more Infinity Stones, maybe he only kills a quarter of the population instead of half. Maybe he doesn't kill them, he puts them into a coma. Like, there are a million things that you can do that can make the PCs go, okay, he still did this thing, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it would have been. And even, like, he couldn't have the result that he wanted because he didn't harvest all of that defiler energy that he wanted to harvest. So, like, yeah, we've lost all this stuff, but so is he. Having him get his snap that clears the mists away and turns Ravenloft into a glorious paradise, that is nothing compared to the look on his face when he doesn't make it happen.
Yeah, and to the Death Star example, the PCs are like, okay, there's this Kyber crystal shipment coming to power the Death Star laser. We stop it from getting there. So the Death Star doesn't destroy a planet. Yeah. Oh, good. The Death Star is not in the work. But it could be, no, but now the super laser is weak enough that it doesn't explode the planet outright. It, like, cracks its crust and starts an implosion process. So it's like, yes, it still destroys Alderaan, but they're able to evacuate, like, 25% of the population. Yeah. So, like, you know, that is a heck of a victory.
Oh, yeah.
To say we saved 25% of the population of this peaceful planet because we, yes, but the Death Star. Yes. So that is the key here. I think more than anything else, that's the kind of cutting the Gordian knot of the in character we want to stop the snap, but out of character, no, we don't. Is the snap kills 25% because they stop him from getting one of the Infinity Stones. He's not able to full snap. Yeah. So, talking about our idea for the story, either Thanos without the Infinity Stones or Thanos with the Infinity Stones, more likely if you're going to have Thanos and the Infinity Stones, kind of our package.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about a couple of variants because there's all sorts of play groups that might want to engage their D&D Ravenloft game with the dominant pop culture franchise of the planet in our Dread Possibility section. So, with a pop culture icon as dominant and as deep in just the general pop culture background noise as Thanos, as we mentioned, our kids have never seen an Avengers movie, they'll say Thanos snap.
Yeah.
Or we said we were doing an episode about Thanos, and our 6-year-old got really excited, who just knows Thanos from, like, memes and YouTube videos. And there's a very good chance you might have younger players, you might have older players, adult players, they'd all be interested in doing something with Thanos. That would be exciting for them to do. So we always like to talk about our Dread Possibilities, different variants, our aging up, our aging down, for those younger players, older players, and we'll start with the aging down. With younger players, we're going to immediately kind of go against what we were saying in the last section. Yeah. Full on stop the snap. No heroic sacrifice necessary. There is no, like, dramatic versus gamatological tension in this for a group of kids. Just let them do it. Yeah. You also obviously don't need to dig into the Nebula Gamora stuff.
Please don't.
Messy family dynamic. Like, it's that whole, you can say a villain has done horrible things and killed people, and it's so, like, big and dramatic, and even show, you know, their space lasers blowing up planets and killing, you know, all the people on Gamora's planet and all that.
Or you can have somebody like Drax, where it's in his backstory that Thanos killed his family.
But that's still a level of remove. It's that personal, watching him, Nebula, Gamora, what he did to them, their relationship with each other, their relationship with him. That's, I think, the most powerful statement of the villainousness of this character.
Yes.
That this is a truly bad person.
Oh man, I was looking up some stuff about Nebula that wasn't in the movies and the MCU wiki. And if you really want to hate Thanos even more than you already do, go read that entry. Oof.
So that is the most intense, the most sort of powerfully, emotionally gripping evil of Thanos. So you might want to dial that back.
Yeah.
You also, in general, if I were doing for younger players, I would just make him less eloquent, more like comic book Thanos, more just kind of a super villain, more Cobra Commander, less Josh Brolin, like more just, this is the bad guy who wants to do this bad thing, and he's stupid and bad.
Yeah. You don't hashtag Thanos did nothing wrong. They have no media literacy. They would have an excuse to be doing that.
So, otherwise, pretty much, Thanos is so omnipresent in pop culture. The snap, the Infinity Stones, like such a common thing. I think this could be a great thing to do, a sort of very grandiose, larger than life, kind of fun, engaging that pop culture campaign framework to do with younger players. What about with adults who hopefully do have the media literacy to recognize that the movie is not, in fact, endorsing Thanos, and he is, in fact, wrong about everything.
Yes. Okay, we're almost certainly going to need a skip ahead warning for this. So Future Rachel is going to come in with a content warning and how far to skip ahead now. Hello, dear listeners. We are going to be talking about body horror, mind control, and the emotional abuse of Thanos' children. If you want to give that a pass, then go ahead and skip forward about 4.5 minutes. Boop. So even though Thanos is clearly wrong, there's also, given that little tiny edge of what if his plan is actually effective in some way, can make for a more compelling story. So we were talking about that he's doing these smaller rituals before he has his plan to do this across all of the domains, because he's kind of trying to restore the magic to the land. What if he does this in Haslan, or in one of the parts of Darkon, if you're doing 5e Darkon, one of the parts that's been, eaten by the mist, or if you're doing original Darkon, what if he does it around Necropolis? And it works, and stuff gets restored. And that actually, he's still wrong and evil and awful, but it gives actual teeth to the moral dilemma in a really fascinating way.
That's the nice thing, is because Ravenloft is Ravenloft, you don't have the obvious, why don't you spend double resources? You could come up with reasons why this might be the only way to make things better. You
can get, we talked about what he does to Nebula, and maybe he's doing it to some of the other children also. Maybe he's just kind of generally doing augmentations on them, because you can do that with magic. You can get real grody with that. You can just get some real nasty body horror Thanos children.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe they all used to look normal. Maybe Ebony Maw had a nose at one point in his life.
The point I was going to make. The true what if. If Ebony Maw had a nose.
Or some real nasty, even if they mostly just kind of look the way they do, Corvus Glaive does a thing and suddenly explodes into horrible Akira tentacles or whatever. You can get real nasty and have a lot of fun. Getting into the opposite of aging up, you can really dig into that messy family dynamic. You can make this a little bit more Encanto. One of the things with the movies is we definitely hear a lot about and see a lot of evidence of how horribly he treated Nebula and Gamora. But other than in Endgame, his children are either in, fully 100% Team Thanos, or they have turned on him or are about to turn on him. Nebula, at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy, she's flipped. We don't see them other than in Endgame. We don't see them at that bit where they're still, fawning and crawling before him and desperate for his approval. Because that's so heartbreaking, and it's horrible to watch in Endgame. And Session Zero it, but that is some horror that can be dug into that wasn't dug into as thoroughly in the movies, because, yikes.
Because, this is a Ravenloft game. It's a horror game. Those aren't horror movies.
Exactly.
And they contain horrific elements.
Absolutely.
But fundamentally, they're not horror in a way that, in theory, a Ravenloft game is.
Yeah. Then you can also, if you're having them at that moment before they're ready to turn on them, that could also be really fun for your PCs. It's not just there for you to be enjoying the misery. It's also because that means that they're right on the brink of being flipped, but they haven't gotten there themselves yet, and then your PCs can flip them. And how good are your PCs going to feel if they're the ones who make Gamora decide to be good?
Yes,
That's going to be great.
Or get Nebula to finally break away and...
to say, Daddy will never love you, Nebula. And then we were talking about kind of doing with the Chitauri and how they're a hive mind, and how they could possibly be kind of related to the Thrykean in some way. And then, a horror place to go with that is, what if they were Thrykean? What if they were, autonomous intelligence insect creatures who basically got borged together? And then kind of, extending that further, what if there are non-insects who are in the hive? What if he takes people, his failed children who don't make the cut, get hive-minded?
Yeah.
And yikes.
And I mentioned the whole, I really see and understand and empathize with everything with the Chitauri is they don't worry about it. So they're the stormtroopers from Star Wars.
Yeah,
they're these are just the guys that the Avengers can mow through, and it's awesome, and don't even worry about it. Yeah. Okay? They're robot bugs. And once again, that's totally understandable for kind of an action adventure movie, but that is a potential point of horror.
Yes.
If you are trying to run this as more of a horror game, that is potential point of horror in Thanos that they're glossing over in the movies, but that you could explore.
although some of that stuff is a little on the intense side, has the content warning, it is also pretty short because it's pretty obvious how to age up Thanos.
Yeah,
like, these movies are PG-13, they're close to there. You probably don't need a whole lot of help with how to age up Thanos. But we do have a lot more AUs than usual in this episode.
Indeed. This is me coming in hot without that lore stuff. So, Thanos was always part of the Marvel space sphere, right? And he was always a space villain. And that's true of Avengers as well. Is like, it's really... Infinity War is like half a Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Yeah.
Or a Thor movie. It's very much... It's got a lot of stuff on Earth, and I think it juggles a lot of the tones really well. But it's really one foot in the Marvel space stories.
Yeah.
And it really... it works narratively as a darklord for this kind of, planet-bound Thanos with his big castle in the desert, in Ravenloft, in the mist and everything. But I understand for some people that's not going to feel like real Thanos.
Yeah.
Real Thanos has spaceships. Unfortunately, D&D gives us the option of giving D&D Thanos spaceships.
Yes, D&D can have spaceships.
So one potential story is make this Spelljammer. And you could still keep in the Ravenloft thing. Little plug for our product, the Raven Nebula. We did this previously with Treasure Planet.
Yeah.
You turn the domains into planets, and this can just be, there is basically this planet called Titan. It's a desert. Maybe it's even just Athos if you're keeping the dark side. And there's this castle, city, sanctuary. And, I mean, yeah, it's like one set, but honestly, in the MCU, or indeed in any science fiction franchise, how many times are planets more than one set?
Yeah.
Like, how many times in Star Trek do they go to a planet and it's one building? Like 3 rooms. That whole planet is 3 rooms that they're negotiating with.
And a matte painting.
So this is very, like, in keeping with the spirit of sci-fi adventure stories, that there's the planet Titan, and that planet is one set, which is Thanos' fortress.
Yeah.
And you could also then just have this as part of this overall Raven Nebula, or you could have it be part of this Spelljammer, kind of unique Ravenloft setting in Spelljammer. So, like, they're playing Spelljammer, but there is this, like, mist, astral mist around the planet Titan. And to go into that astral mist is to go to the planet Titan and to be in kind of Spelljammer Ravenloft.
Yeah.
And speaking of Spelljammer, there actually is the Spelljammer 5th edition that came out. There's a couple of points of connection here. They introduced this thing, Doom Space, which was this, like, a star had become a black hole, but there were still some, like, planets orbiting it being slowly pulled in. And it's very clear this was kind of supposed to be Darksun. This was, for a reason I'm not going to go into right now, this was Darksun. So,
but it makes sense. That's the ultimate kind of end of Defiler magic. Is that they kill the sun.
So that could even be Thanos did it. Like, Thanos, in his quest to have enough magic to get the Infinity Stones, is the one that caused the Dark Sun to become a black sun, a black hole sun, and won't you come? Markov cogeneration.
Yes.
And Google it, kids. And
love you.
So, like, that could even be, that's like a clue. That, like, oh, this is supposed to be Dark Sun, but it's destroyed. That's a clue. And Titan could be one of the moons of Athos that's still orbiting it, he's protecting with his magic. And the great thing, oh my goodness, there's so many connections. So the campaign that introduces this black hole system that clearly was supposed to be kind of like a version of Dark Sun, the villains are this astral elf, space elf empire called the Zeraxians, who, like, their star, I'm running bits, I'm sorry if I got the details wrong, but their star is starting to go out, so they're sending these crystal, like, pillars to planets to drain the planet's life energy to feed their star. Which sounds a lot like kind of our thing. So what if you ran Light of Zeraxis, but then it actually had that be your Avengers #1, and the Zeraxians are your Loki.
Yeah,
where
nice.
You fight them, and you stop them, and you, like, destroy the big crystal tower that's taking all the star energy. But then the reveal is they got this technology from Thanos in exchange for them, like, giving him an Infinity Stone or something, or helping him. They're doing something. That they're like Loki. He gave them the magic to keep their star going if they agreed to help him. So that then you could seg into Thanos as your post-Light of Zeraxis big bad for your whole campaign.
Nice.
Also, if you are doing this as a Spelljammer campaign that also then, we've been talking a lot about ending the mists or ending the Curse of Ravenloft or things like that. You also have a couple potential other plans for Thanos. So one could be, we kind of touched on this, the idea that Defiler magic will inevitably lead to the stars exploding. You want to use more as a Spelljammer villain, you could have it be that he, like, believes all magic will eventually become Defiler magic. So in this case, his plan can still be to destroy half the population, but it's specifically like, I can destroy half the population and I can use that life energy to destroy magic.
Yeah.
To, like, end the weave of magic.
Which would be an extremely logical plan for this version of Thanos to have.
Yes, and that gives you a huge epic. Like, that's something that's really going to shake the foundations if your players know D&D at all. The idea that he is going to destroy all magic.
Yeah.
You could also have...
That gives us Dragonlance 5th Age. Nobody wants that.
Also, with Ravenloft, we've mentioned that trying to sort of end the mist or end the horrors or things like that. And there's a neat, if you want to follow that, if you really want Ravenloft grounded Thanos, you could also specifically have it revolve around a non-popular in the Kohler household plot element that they've introduced in New Ravenloft that is, I don't really understand. If you understand, sound out in the comments. And that's the kind of most of the population being soulless. And what if it was not just half the population? What if it was, if I can reduce the population to just the ensouled people, that'll, like, end Ravenloft being Ravenloft. That'll, like, end the mists, and Ravenloft will just be, like, another plane in the D&D multiverse.
I think he'd have the argument that they're not even really people at all.
So you could really, like, dig into, and I would love to run this because I hate this plot element. And this is a fantastic way to, like, deconstruct that. To be like, let's wrestle with that. Let's talk about that. What does it mean to be adventurers, theoretically heroes, in this setting with some people have souls and most people don't have souls? Like, how does that change our moral responsibility, our moral calculus? And that really gives the weight to his utilitarianism. And so I would love, this is how I would run it, I think. Because I think that's going to be a really fun dilemma to dig into.
But then you would have to acknowledge the whole half of them don't have souls thing.
Yes.
It's the only problem with this, man.
Finally, of course, all of our Thanos plans have been taken from the MCU. He wants to get the Infinity Stones, do the snap, half the population will die, for some, like, utilitarian goal. Some, like, well-meaning utilitarian goal. Like, we are all of us in favor of the overall goal of more resources for everyone. It's the utilitarian ends justify the means point he's making. Consequentialist, yeah. You could also, in D&D, and this is a wonderful thing, because this would work in a way it would not work in the MCU. You could have comics Thanos plan because they're gods of death.
They hadn't introduced a certain character, but, you know, I'd snap half the universe for her.
So, that's the thing. Like, D&D... I completely get why they're like, we cannot have it be that he is trying to impress death in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That does not fit the tone. But absolutely fits D&D. There are so many gods and goddesses of death. So many ways you could do personification of death. You could absolutely have Thanos as a cleric of one of these gods of death, being like, this is my ultimate act of devotion. This is the sort of ultimate sacrifice on their altar that I am making. The altar is the cosmos, and I am sacrificing half of the living on that altar.
Yeah, and on our Discord, Emma writes, hi Emma writes,
hello.
When she was talking about why she likes comics Thanos better than MCU Thanos, she actually even had the point that in Ravenloft, you could have it be that he's sacrificing half the population to impress the dark powers.
Right. And I would love, like, somebody in Ravenloft making that connection about the dark powers and being like, okay, these are the supreme gods of this setting. Like, I may as well worship them. Like, I should worship them because they are sort of the true gods of this setting, which is a fair point to make. So, we've given you Thanos for younger players who mostly know it through YouTube videos about Minecraft and stuff. We've Thanos for older people that know Thanos from the dominant pop culture Juggernaut Empire and maybe some of the older source materials. We've given you a number of possible iterations of running Thanos as a boss of your campaign. So let's wrap up our discussion of the supreme boss fight of any D&D campaign that you could have and give you our parting thoughts in a section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing I want to talk about in parting thoughts is the genre of horror. This is from American Side to Ravenloft. They have a bunch of different genres of horror. They talk about which domains fit those genres, like Barovia for Gothic, like what sort of are hallmarks of that horror, what are signifiers of that horror. It's a really great section. One of the best parts of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.
Yeah.
And I think we were just talking a minute ago. We haven't shared this yet, but we both say there's a pretty strong contender and then a good secondary contender. So I think strong contender, we're looking at disaster horror.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, disaster horror. I'm writing it and typing it.
Like, even, like, if you do the snap, then there's the, oh my gosh, implications of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, yeah, and of course there's Titan itself. Like,
yeah.
No matter what scale of adventure you're running, it's disaster horror.
Yeah, or you're trying to prevent that apocalypse. It's an apocalypse.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, Titan is a post-apocalyptic world. He's trying to make an apocalypse happen. You're trying to prevent it. And if the snap happens and you do your own version of Endgame, it's going to be a post-apocalyptic setting.
Yeah.
Which, you can get into maybe more than the MCU has so far.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to get that into a changed status quo.
Yeah, but man, I would love more stuff about what was going on during the snap years.
Yes. And then the second one I was thinking was dark fantasy.
I was thinking cosmic horror.
Cosmic horror.
Basically,
go on.
Cosmic horror it wouldn't be for the, like, kind of smaller scale stuff, kind of the one-shot ideas like the Rescue of Gamora or whatever, but it would be very much for all the Infinity Stone-based stuff. The idea that the universe could be hinging on the whim of a madman.
Yeah, like, I mean, the ending of Infinity War is a moment of cosmic horror.
Yeah,
the snap is a moment of cosmic horror. It is just reality itself betraying sanity and decency.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good point. I was thinking dark fantasy because it's such a core fantasy story. Quest for the stones, magic.
Yeah.
We need to stop the big bad wizard man from finding the 7 magical stones to do his big bad wizard man thing.
Yeah, I think probably, like, cosmic horror is one, like, for that specific, if you go that far in the story, but I think, dark fantasy is kind of more generally applicable.
Cool, so our official write-up one will have disaster horror and dark fantasy, but, let the record show that you can easily make this a absolutely horrendous scene of cosmic horror.
Oh, yeah.
So, the second thing we'd like to talk about is what kind of game to run in this setting. Now, some Ravenloft domains, like Barovia, for example, are rich enough and complex enough and varied enough for a full level 1 to 11 Curse of Strahd style campaign. And indeed, with Barovia, like, you could go beyond. Like, if you especially brought an older material, you could go even more in Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
Whereas other domains are really meant for, like, one adventure. They're like a one-shot domain. So, in our Labyrinth episode, which you should listen to, if you haven't yet, that Rachel mentioned there's this domain, Sienna. Say anything.
Sienna.
So this domain
Sienna
is the theater with the mad playwright who controls the reality and tries to, like, pull you into the play.
It's WandaVision.
And that's one adventure. That is one, like, session probably, maybe one, like, 2-3-parter. But that's it. Like, you do that story, you presumably escape the WandaVision reality warping theater because then otherwise your campaign's over.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you're like, well, we did that. Check.
Nobody spends years and years in the theater.
And both of these are valid and good and proper to have in Ravenloft. Like, a healthy Ravenloft ecosystem needs both of these domain types. And with this one, we've boiled all of this. You already know what we're going to say.
Yes.
You were paying attention earlier. And there absolutely is potential for one-shots. We wanted to give you potential for one-shots. If you just want to have Thanos, introduce him, have a story with Thanos, you think that's cool. But this is the big determiner, are you going to bring in the story about the Infinity Stones?
Yes.
Because that is a Curse of Strahd campaign. That is a level 1 to 11 Curse of Strahd style campaign.
And it's different from most of the ones where we talk about this, because most of these we're talking about the domain being a place for concept for a lengthy campaign. And you cannot set a lengthy campaign in Titan.
Not going to spend levels 1 to 11 in Titan.
No. But tangling with Thanos, engaging with his machinations in other domains, that you're going to be able to spend a whole campaign on if you're doing the Infinity Stones.
And we've even mentioned the possibility, if you don't want to have, like, I'm doing the MCU, but in Dungeons & Dragons, to not have him be your big bad and, like, have maybe Aslan kills him off and steals the gauntlet, which would be pretty sick.
Yeah.
Still, that's what your campaign's about. You're not doing a one-shot about the Infinity Stones. Once you introduce those, you're locking into a big campaign, and Thanos is such a big presence, you're locking into a big campaign. That is a Curse of Strahd style game that you're going to run. You can have a one-shot just with Thanos, but Curse of Strahd, Thanos plus Infinity Stones.
Yeah.
So, is there any, I've mentioned Curse of Strahd a bunch of times, is there potentially older Ravenloft material, if they really like the idea of a big Ravenloft Infinity War, everybody trying, all the darklords trying to get Infinity Stones, Thanos going to Barovia and Darkon and everything, blasting them kind of thing. Older material they could bring in.
Oh, good heavens, yes. And there's a lot of ways to incorporate this into, like, even if you're doing 5e Ravenloft, there's a way to kind of bring in some of, like, the politics and interactions that I loved so much, like the domains interacting with each other that we saw in older Ravenloft. Because, like we talked about, these are the ultimate MacGuffins. Every super powerful wizard type wants to do what he's doing. Like, if you have it, that this is possible.
Yeah.
Because, again, part of why we're putting it at the state where we're putting it, where he's only attuned to one and there's no Infinity Gauntlet yet, is to have the wiggle room to say maybe it's not possible, so it doesn't eat your entire campaign or our entire podcast storyline.
Our entire audio drama.
Yeah. Like, once that becomes a thing, Aslan wants to get the Infinity Gauntlet to Thanos snap. Hazlitt wants to get the Infinity Gauntlet to Thanos snap. Strahd wants to get the Infinity Gauntlet to Thanos snap. They all want to do this.
Every Darklord, by definition, has a torment. And the Infinity Gauntlet, as presented in pretty much every version, would be the thing that would, like, solve the torment.
Yeah. And then even if you are doing the Gauntlet isn't a thing, this is just, some, like, pet theory of his that the Dark Powers are never going to let him attain. But the Infinity Stones are all out there. Every Darklord still has an Infinity Stone that they would give their IT for. So we've got this idea of the Infinity Stones are each linked to a specific school of magic. And I don't remember if she's rogue in 5th edition, but in 2nd and 3rd edition, Ivano, she kind of had the rogue thing going with her poison, that, like, she could never kiss anybody because they would die. So Ivano would kill for the Abjuration Stone. Like, she could just, like, temporarily cancel her curse for a while and finally have a boyfriend. Like, she would love that. Or, as gross as it is to think about, Strahd and the Enchantment Stone, I'm just leaving that there and moving on.
I mean, you know Strahd, I know Strahd.
We all know Strahd.
We all know what Strahd wants.
There was one of the Darklords in the older material was a werewolf who loved being a werewolf, but he kept turning into a human at inopportune times. And Jacqueline Rainier's curse was that the other way around in the old. It was terrible. She would turn into a rat at inopportune times. Just so dumb. It's like, but either of them would want the transmutation.
Yes.
Stone. It's just so. Every Darklord, like, there's something about their curse that they can alleviate with one or more of the stones.
And even if you're going to roll, like, no, the Dark Powers wouldn't let that happen, it wouldn't work for them, like, they would be gunning for it. This would be a strong possibility of giving them the thing they want, of being able to not turn into a rat in opportune minds, like a silly little cartoon.
It's so dumb, oh my god.
That's so silly.
She was a great Darklord, she had a terrible curse, it was so bad. Oh, man. And then that even gives you, like, a great campaign structure if you're going from domain to domain, like, finding all these Infinity Stones that the Darklords have gotten their hands on. And even if it's not to get around their torment, there's still going to be something that they can do with it that they want to do. So, like, again, Jacqueline Rainier, if she's not trying to not turn into a rat, then she also was, in the older materials, she was trying to do this big were-rat plague. She was basically trying to make lycanthropy airborne. And then, because she was the one who created the plague, like, she would have progeny control and have control over all of the were-rats of Reachmallow, who is everyone in Reachmallow. And the Transmutation Stone can help with that.
Right, that has to be helpful.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of amazing things that the Darklords could be doing with these. And that gives you a good, like, going around to the domains, foiling whatever evil plan they have and catching them all. And then, of course, speaking of catching them all, that's what Aslan and Hazlitt want to do. And meanwhile, Thanos hates both of those guys because they're evil wizard kings and they remind him of everything he hates about Darksun.
They're like the best argument for his cause in Ravenloft.
And, like, if you have a world of Thanos in it with this backstory, Thanos and Aslan and Hazlitt have all butted heads many times and will butt heads many more. So that's mostly going off of current stuff, other than, I'm mainly touching on the plans and the curses of the older Darklords because I'm more familiar with them. You can apply all of that to current stuff. But then for older material, for bringing in some of the older domains, we mentioned Tovag in our Shan Yu episode. and Tovag had a lot of this, like, perpetual war machine energy. Its Cast the Betrayer was the Dark Lord, and so everything was about, like, building up his war machine against Vecna. And there was, like, this whole creepy thing where children aged super fast so that he could, impress them into his army faster. And so you could look at some of the Tovag stuff and apply some of that, especially if you wanted, like, a more general dark fantasy flavor and less of a Dark Sun-specific flavor.
The channel PhD&D just did, as of recording, it was a couple of weeks ago, one about Tovag.
Oh, great.
And he was talking about what sort of sources you could draw from. And he mentioned, let's get rid of those color generational bingo card references. He mentioned Vampire Hunter D.
Oh,
and the idea of,
yeah.
like, a kind of post-apocalyptic techno-feudal society.
Oh.
And that is, like, perfect fit for Thanos.
That is,
That is a perfect, like, the children of Thanos riding around on robot horses.
Gosh, yes.
And,
That's sick.
Yeah, and honestly, like, the Chitauri, if you think about it, are kind of trying to be sort of techno-feudal.
Yeah.
Like, they're like space guys, but they're also kind of like a fantasy berserker barbarian, like rampager type guys.
That's awesome.
So,
I love that.
Another area I think is just any kind of Tovag aesthetic stuff you could pull in and use for Thanos' army.
Yeah.
Especially if we're like a D&D-ified version of the Chitauri. Vampire Hunter D is not a terrible, like, aesthetic touchstone.
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard of Tovag. I have not heard of this. Next place. I've never heard of any of these names I'm saying on the script right here. So I'm excited and ready to learn.
You should be. This is awesome. Okay, so Tovag is for if you want to, like, get the Thanos stuff but kind of lean out of the Dark Sun stuff. If you want to lean into the Dark Sun stuff, second edition actually had a Dark Sun domain already, which was Khalidne. In the Domains of Dread era, they, like, wanted to have a domain kind of based on all of the worlds and everything. They were like, hey, Sithicus is great, and it's based on Kryn. Let's do that for everybody. And Khalidne was their Dark Sun domain. So, first off, for plundering Khalidne for material, the geography has some stuff that's super stealable, like, especially, again, for one-shot plots, because the way that it worked was that they had their big city-state, which is also called Khalidne. It was very confusing. It was kind of the version of Sanctuary. And then there was, like, one tiny patch of arable land kind of way over on the other side of the domain, and there was a town there. And the Dark Lord would, like, regularly send just armed enforcers to go and get the crops and take them to Khalidne to feed the people. And so everyone in the farming town, like, they're starving out, and they, they're getting food as fast as they can, but it's never enough.
I have also seen Seven Samurai and enjoyed it.
Exactly!
Yeah.
Exactly! You could do a Seven Samurai.
Nice, with the Children of Thanos.
With the Children of Thanos. How cool would that be?
That sounds pretty sick. Pretty awesome.
And that also could be a nice thing if you wanted a little bit more of, like, an actual functioning economy of some kind. A little bit more of an idea of how this works and, how they're doing anything other than cricket slurry.
Also, it sounds like it's a very, like, stealable map. If you're like, I want a map of Titan, this sounds perfect for our purposes. Yeah.
And that's also, like, a potential place. These are people who aren't directly under Thanos' thumb, so if you want to do the story where you start a rebellion and then leave, then this will give you a place to do that. It's something that's not Khalidne specific. It's a Dark Sun thing that we didn't mention in our thing, but Khalidne is surrounded by this thing called the Silt Sea, which is apparently a Dark Sun thing. When they were doing all of their horrible Defiler magic stuff, the seas dried up. And so all that's left is these, like, 20 feet deep of silt, and if you try and step on it, you sink down to the packed sand underneath, and you choke and die, and so you have to, like, go out in special snowshoes or skimmers or whatever, and there are, like, horrible sand monsters lurking under the surface.
So cool.
So Khalidne was bordered by the Silt Sea on all sides, so that was kind of the mists would rise up out of it at night, because it was kind of the last little bits of water coming up, so if you wanted to steal that creepy image, then...
That's awesome,
Yeah. And then... Okay,
Here comes some names.
So if you want to plot twist the heck out of your PCs, if you're like, I love the idea of making my PCs think that Thanos is the big bad, but I don't want him to actually be my big bad. I want to do something with that. Then you can steal the backstory of the Dark Lord mess of Khalidne, Thakok An, and Khalidma. So, okay. So back when they were in Dark Sun, Khalidma was the Sorcerer King.
Right.
Thakok An was one of his Templars, so this is, his children, basically.
Right.
And she was in love with him. And, of course, he was beneath her notice, because he's a Sorcerer King. And She found out that there were plans to assassinate him, but she also found a ritual. There's a thing that the Sorcerer Kings do where they, like, become dragon gods or something. And he was working on that, and it was, like, coming along slowly, and she found a way that she could, like, super goose it. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. And then the assassination attempt will fail because he's a god now. And then, like, I'll be the one who, like, served him the best of all, and Daddy will love me best. And so she does the ritual, which involves, like, killing her entire family, so there's her active ultimate darkness. But it goes wrong. And possibly just because the Dark Powers said this is fun and made it go wrong. They pull Caligna into the mist. Caligma is now, like, comatose in the basement of the temple, pretty much. Thakok Ann is pretending that he's still there and talking to her, and she's the only one who hears his voice. But he's gone. He's in a coma. The love of her life. And she's trying to bring him back, but at the same time not, because she has him all to herself.
This is awesome.
She's the one, like, taking care of his comatose body. So what if your PC, they're dealing with all the children of Thanos and everything is like, there's Nebula, there's Ebony Maw, there's Gamora, there's Proxima Midnight. But it turns out that, like, Nebula is in the Thakok Ann position because she finally wanted Daddy to love her.
She's the best girl.
Yeah.
And now no one can argue that.
No one can argue that.
That is so good. That is phenomenal. That would be the plot twist of all plots.
Yes. So, you're welcome.
And then finally, not older Ravenloft material, but the first thing that came in my mind, it was a Forgotten Realms story, I believe. Like, maybe Greyhawk, pretty sure Forgotten Realms. Pretty famous campaign from the second edition era, the Rod of 7 Parts. It's what it sounds like. It's magic rod, divided into 7 parts. Each part has special powers. They get more powerful, put them together. And it is this, like, go around and try and stop the bad guy from getting the pieces and getting the pieces yourself. So you could use that Rod of 7 Parts, but with Thanos as your bad guy. You could take a lot of stuff from that adventure, which is on DM's Guild. You could take a lot of the locations, the encounters, the factions, and just have it be the Infinity Stones instead. So easiest older material thing to mix with this whole Thanos Infinity Stone story.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'd like to do in parting thoughts is talk about the strengths and challenges of running a Thanos Ravenloft game. And strengths is great. Thanos is a great villain. We have tried to give you a couple of options to be able to use him in a one-shot. You have the MCU as a great example for how to pace it. He's a really interesting villain. He's really charismatic. He's really thoughtful. He has this kind of ostensibly noble intention that would make them that there's a reason he's stuck.
Yes.
There's a reason he's still remembered years after these movies. There's a reason, there are people that are like #Thanos was right.
I mean, again, Miltonian cesspool.
Because he is just such a good, memorable, charismatic villain. The Infinity Stones make the ultimate MacGuffin, and as we keep saying, the MacGuffin hunt, this is one of the iconic, like, campaign structures, story structures, in terms of it's very clear. It's got a clear arc. It's got a clear pacing, but it's super flexible.
Yeah,
you can do anything you want with where you put the stones.
Yeah, and also something with the stones. This is live, baby. When we were kind of trying to twist ourselves into pretzels and figure out how to make our meta plot match the Infinity Stones thing, we were like, wait, are the Infinity Stones a thing? Is the Infinity Gauntlet a thing? We did, like, a little side thing where we were trying to figure out, like, what big Disney magic item MacGuffins would map to what stones. And that was so fun.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to say a whole lot of them because we might still do something with some of these and I don't want to spoil it. But, like, the Abjuration Stone is Rapunzel. She's in the Vision position because it was the flower and now it's her.
Yes.
So there's so much fun stuff you could do with figuring out what Ravenloft thing is what stone.
This is just like nerd candy. This is the thing nerds like to do. It's like, what would be the Disney Infinity Stones based on the schools of magic? And also, we've touched on this a bunch, even that possibility you just gave with that crazy Dark Sun nonsense. The fact that it's this huge, earth-shaking, grandiose villain, but with the children, with Gamora and Nebula, we have this very personal story.
Yeah.
So your PCs could engage in that very personal, very relationship-based story if you have a kind of Gamora or Nebula figure. But Rachel, what about, and we speak from personal experience with as Rachel just mentioned, what about some of the challenges?
This will eat your entire campaign.
Ask us how we know.
Ask us how we know. Like, the fact that the Infinity Stones are quite deliberately the MacGuffin of all MacGuffins, and we had to make them ridiculously powerful to justify that. Like, we had to have it be, okay, well, if this is the case, then these have to be earth-shatteringly powerful.
Yeah.
But in that case, we were like, well, this wasn't our plan. We weren't planning to have Aslan looking for any of the Infinity Stones, let alone all of the Infinity Stones. So how can we still make this work and not lose the entire metaplot that we've been working on?
We mentioned, if the Infinity Stones existed in Ravenloft, every Darklord primary goal would be to get their hands on one or all of them.
Yeah. We keep talking about how a lot of the stuff that we're saying applies to Thanos and not to Titan. Titan itself, it's kind of a nothing domain. Like, it's cool, it's creepy. You can have one or two really cool creepy sessions there, but it's not much. It's not juicy.
Of all the episodes we've ever done, I think this is the one where we just have to use the name of the Darklord for it to mean anything to anyone.
Yeah.
Or it has to be like, this is not if you want to run a Neverland game or an Arendelle game, but a Thanos game.
Yeah. And then this one, it took me a while to figure out what I meant by this. Because when we were talking about challenges, all I could think was something about running Thanos looking for the Infinity Stones feels hackier than running a Disney domain. And all I can think of is just because we have Marvel fatigue. Mm-hmm. But I was rolling it around, and that isn't it. I put my finger on what it was.
Okay,
this
cool.
is live, baby. Tom doesn't know what it was.
It's not in the script.
And it's that if you're doing Thanos looking for the Infinity Stones, then both your villain and your plot are derivative. Like, if you're remixing things, like, if you're having one of your Disney villains as your big bad, if you're having, like, Hades or Dr. Facilier or whoever, if they're your Darklord, you're not just doing the plot of the movie, you're having to add more to that, you're bringing in your own stuff. But if you're having it be Thanos is looking for the Infinity Stones because he wants to do a snap and destroy half of the multiverse, then it's, we've seen those movies. Like, this is just, we're just playing through those movies we've already seen. You have to, like, find some way to remix it and make it your own in order to have it not just feel extremely cheesy. Like, doing the thing we were talking about with Aslan takes the Infinity Stones and now he's trying to stop Aslan instead of Thanos. Or doing something with, like, one of the alternate plans we were talking about. He's trying to destroy magic. He's, trying to woo the dark powers, whatever. Or, having it be, like, Nebula's the actual Darklord. But if you're just straight up running an Infinity War game, that's going to feel very derivative.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, there's pros, there's cons. It all comes down to Thanos is so big. Not just literally in terms of being a big purple guy, but in terms of just eats up all the oxygen in the room. He is the star the campaign is going to orbit. Whether you like it or not.
Yeah. The black hole sun the campaign's going to orbit around?
If, that is, of course, if you decide you do want to make your campaign be a version of Infinity War of the Avengers movies, or if you have an idea for a Disney version of the Illusion Stone, that is one we could not figure out an analog for, and we are open to suggestions.
Yes.
How could they contact us?
Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Tumblr, or Patreon at Wonderful World of Darklords. And on YouTube, we're just Wonderful World of Darklord. We don't have the S.
And before we do our sort of final wrap-up here, and before we rejoin our narrator and find out where she is going next, we have to make a point about where she's going next, because it is different from usual. Because last year, we took the opportunity of summer to do a little side series called Summer Blockbuster. We talked about live-action movie. That's year,
where a lot of you came in, via Kraken Week.
Via Kraken Week, via Pirates of the Caribbean. This year, we are doing a small screen summer. So we are going to do 3 Disney animated shows that we think would make excellent Ravenloft domains.
So Phineas and Ferb was kind of a preview.
Yeah, right? And it needed kind of help us nail down the format, because it is going to be differently formatted, because talking about a show, adapting a show is different from adapting a movie in a lot of ways. We're still, as of recording, nailing down what that format to look like.
It's not going to be wildly different, but it is going to have to be a little different, because it is much bigger.
But you will find out the first of those 3 shows, one we've been looking forward to talking about for a long time, when you get to our final D section.
And also by now, we should have our second round of Listener's Choice voting up. Our first round of voting was in April. That was the slate that was chosen by our listeners on Discord and then open to everyone. This is the second round, which are the nominations from the Clinic fundraiser, which, again, thank you so much to everybody who donated. Thank you so much. It means the world to us. So if you go to our Patreon, we'll have the link in the show notes. We'll have the list there that you can vote on. We're recording this in April, so I don't know what won the previous one. I know who's in the lead, but it's still anyone's game. But now we're on our second round, so go ahead to our Patreon and let us know who you want to vote for.
So if you like how we adapted the MCU into a potential Ravenloft, D&D, Spelljammer, whatever campaign, then I also have a couple of horror movies I've adapted to horror adventures. That was a lot simpler than this. If you just look for more by this author on the free write-up for this domain, then DM's Guild and the link in the show notes, or if you go to DM's Guild and search for Tom Kohler, you can find those things. If you like our consideration for your learned about Thanos from Minecraft videos, younger players, we also have some guides for running more horror, spooky-themed games for younger players.
And then speaking of younger people, I have a picture book, Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. It's exactly what it sounds like. And I also have several short stories for adults available on my website that are more of the, dark fantasy, horror comedy kind of thing. I don't think that I have any that apply to Thanos.
Yes.
A lot of them are available online for free, so go check that out.
Until next time, thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. The blue-skinned tiefling woman escorted me to the border. It galls me to admit it, but we did, in fact, get along. You know that I have had my reservations since acknowledging your true identity, Yensid. But I know this. I have been to Darkon many times, and I will go there many more. I can say, unequivocally, that even before I drew Thanos' attention, I would rather spend a month in Darkon than a minute in Titan. I have no idea what you were looking for or what your plan for it is, but this experience has been clarifying. Even without knowing your goals, I would rather see you accomplish them than Thanos or any number of other rulers I have seen in my travels. To be clear, I do not trust you, and I see no reason to pretend otherwise. You would know it for a lie. Nonetheless, I do not have the luxury of a world of black and white. After reclaiming my journal, I took a shard of stone and prepared to re-enter the mists. I had heard that my next destination was the domain from which Thanos had stolen the Eye of Odin. I have no particular desire to visit anywhere that the Mad Titan has touched, but my patron does compensate me well for it. Pay a man enough, and he'll walk barefoot into hell. Regards, D.
The bloated fly, squirming in the web, has a message for the spider. Musing. As entertaining as Thanos' self-aggrandizing message was, I doubt its delivery was the sole purpose behind your release. For one, he would not want to deal with my inevitable retaliation. And for another, I suspect he hopes you'll reconsider joining his cause. Do not fret, little scholar. I shall ensure the hospitality you endured is repaid in kind. And should his presence prove irksome for our plans, all I need do is dangle a shiny trinket in front of his narrow vision, and he will be convinced it's another of his precious infinity stones, unable and unwilling to see it for what it truly is, a distraction. Though I may not have your trust, little scholar, as you are often fond of reminding me, I find your loyalty and courage invaluable. I cannot deny my enjoyment of a meticulously charted map, but we both know this is not the intention of your excursions. Perhaps someday you will learn the truth and will come to find that my motivation is not as abhorrent as others have implied. They loathe my person and my methods, but they do not understand me, and they never shall. As my little scholar touched upon defiler magic, I need not inform her of its opposite, preservation. As the names imply, defilers destroy the land to empower their casting, and preservers only take what is needed. Preservers must have a patient and delicate hand to master their art. The defilers, on the other hand, well, clearly even overinflated, narrow-minded warlord can master it. The distinction between preservers and defilers reveals much about Thanos himself. Any strong-headed buffoon can destroy, but to create something new while preserving what exists, that is no simple feat. Hence the Titan's obsession with culling half of all life in the name of mercy. It is a lazy, simplistic, and brutish solution to a series of complex and interconnected issues. To truly solve a problem, one must understand its cause, and Thanos could not be bothered with the latter. He would rather remove a finger than dig out the thorn that ails it.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Darklord Aslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. Dear Binks, I need to tell you what happened when I reached the border of Titan. Nebula was not a great talker, but our silence was surprisingly companionable. The air of tightly contained anger about her did not seem directed at me, and something about her made me feel as though I were looking at some warped carnival mirror at the person I might have been if I had not been permitted to express my own emotions. Perhaps the person I might have been had Thanos come to Salem. My attempts to draw her into conversation were largely unsuccessful. It may have been wishful thinking, but I got the sense that she appreciated me speaking to her as though she were a person. When we reached the border, a dim haze of sand whipped by the wind that I knew would serve the same function as the mists. She stopped. In a low voice, she said, "I know very little about this Aslan you serve. All I know is that from the way he received you, my father considers him a threat. That is all I need to know. Should he ever wish to move against my father, find me." She turned to go, but I grabbed her arm. "Wait. If it comes between Thanos and my patron, I'd choose my patron. But I thought of the tales I had heard about Aslan Rex. If even a 10th part of them were true, I had told my patron that I no longer had the luxury of black and white thinking, and I meant it. As long as there are beings like Thanos or Wanda Maximoff against whom to compare him, I cannot think him any darker than gray. But I would be a fool to think him any lighter. But I don't know if I want to choose either of them," I finished. If something with him goes wrong, can we meet without Thanos knowing? And if you ever have a chance to escape, will you find me? Can we help each other?" Nebula held my gaze for a long moment. It was impossible to tell what was happening behind those dark eyes or in that stony face. Finally, her jaw twitched. "We can try. There's one other thing. When you're When Thanos was in my mind, he would have seen something. A doll made of white horsehair. I don't know whether it would hold any interest for him or not. It's not a stone. But if he ever sends you to Crescent City, for the sake of the child you could have been, please do not allow him to get his hands on it. She went very, very still, every muscle in her body going as taut as a drawn bowstring, and I feared that I had overstepped. But at last, she gave me a jerky nod and turned to go back to Sanctuary. I have met all sorts of people over the past 3 years, Binks, from self-proclaimed gods and fey royalty to talking dogs and living toys. But today, I think I did something that I have not done for some time. I think I made a friend. Love, D.
Is this dumbass on his every powerful magic item is an Infinity Stone kick again? I don't even think Infinity Stones are a thing. The Eye of Odin is way more than an evocation machine, you unimaginative eggplant. And if I was just looking for something to expand my spell list, I'd have called in somebody with the spell I need by now. By the way, I may be a withered memory, but I was whiling away my eternity with your mom last night.